This is Dan and Lexi from Dan Schultz Outdoors, reminding you to keep the adventures alive. Hey y'all, I'm Johnny.
And I'm Colleen. And we're the Keel Quest. And we want you to keep the adventures alive. Cheers!
Hey, this is Darren from Ride Paddle Repeat, encouraging you to keep the adventures alive.
This is David from Beachley Ironworks saying keep the adventures alive.
Hey, Kevin with an A here. Keep the adventure alive.
Hi, I'm Dan Mayotte. Keep the adventures alive.
Hi, I'm Kevin Collin, the Happy Camper. Remember, keep the adventures alive. Awesome!
Woo, buddy! Shug here! Keep the adventures alive. I am.
Ethan here, the Avid Outdoorsy Guy, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
We're John and Aaron.
Keep the adventures alive.
Hey everyone, it's Kylan from Lure of the North, and I encourage you to keep the adventures alive.
This is Sky North telling you, keep the adventures alive. And now on with the show.
Hey, happy Tuesday evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of CANOEHOUND'S Outdoor Adventure Show, a show that brings you a lot closer to the great outdoors. My name is Dennis, also known as CANOEHOUND, and if this is your first time joining us tonight, thank you very much. We got a great topic in store for you, and you know what? Hopefully you'll like this show enough to smash that subscribe button or maybe hit that thumbs up. Let's see if we can break a record tonight for thumbs up, if we could pass that 226 mark. That would be really, really cool tonight. Anyways, we are live here every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. With the exception of last week, I had to take a week off, and I'm all energized like the Energizer Bunny for that now, so that's a good thing. Before we get on with tonight's topic, I'd just like to acknowledge all my show sponsors or business affiliates. First, our good friends over at Algonquin Outfitters, Outdoor Adventure and Equipment and Rentals. They have 4 locations all around, in and around Algonquin Park. So if you're ever in the area and you need some good equipment or some good gear, by all means, stop in there and check out and see what they have to offer. Also, our good friends over at Kid Products, makers of the Kid Twig Stove and Reflector Oven. Great products. You can find them online at kihdproducts.com. And you know what? They got a few new goodies on their website now. Geez. And they got some titanium ware, being pots and the big spoons and stuff like that. They got some really cool gear on there. So by all means, check them out. I also like to acknowledge Hunter & Harris Paddles, makers of handcrafted, high-quality cherry wood canoe paddles. I've got a couple myself. They are fantastic to make that canoe of mine move through that water nice and smoothly. And then our good friends over at Novacraft Canoe. They kind of go hand in hand with the Hunter & Harris, right? But our good friends over at Novacraft Canoe, paddling the True North since 1970. And then last but not least, our good friends over at Whitewater Coffee and Crew. Thanks very much for keeping this guy well caffeinated. I'm just waiting. My wife is going to be bringing me down a hot coffee here in a moment, so I missed the opportunity to have a hot sip, but trust me, it's coming. All of their links can be found in the description below. You know what? They support the channel. Hopefully you in turn can support them at some time or another. So by all means, please do check them out. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how to stay warm when you're winter camping. You know what? That's a topic that it needs to be covered, because you know what? Winter camping is such a special thing. It's so beautiful, so much different than camping in the summertime. And whether you're camping in the in the front country or the back country, one of the things that is most difficult is hearing people say, you know what? I had a great time on this trip, but it was cold. I had a hard time sleeping because I couldn't get the chill out of me. Well, tonight, that's what we're going to be doing, is trying to cover that topic, sharing all kinds of tips, tricks, and ideas with you that you can actually take with you and try to utilize. And by doing that, hopefully you'll have a warm, comfortable sleep in the backcountry in the wintertime. Get out there and enjoy it, because you know what? Winter is long here, especially in Southern Ontario, or in Ontario, period. And you know what? If you can get out there and enjoy the winter season, it just makes the winter go that much quicker. And it actually makes you look forward to getting out there. Before we get on with the topic, though, I do have a few more things. The week before last, if you missed the show, we were joined by past whitewater kayaking champion and the host of Paddle TV, Ken Whiting. It was a great show. We learned a lot about him and what he's doing these days with Paddle TV and things of that sort. And a lot of people really just construe Paddle TV with being a kayaking show. Well, it's not, by all means. You have to go on there, check it out. Ken does a lot of whitewater tripping as well, in his canoe or just backcountry camping. So by all means, get on over there, Paddle TV on YouTube here, and check it out. And I'm sure you'll be a subscriber of his before you know it. Let's see here. Also, if you've missed any of our past episodes and you're new to the channel, check out our playlist. You'll see that right in the description just down below here. You'll see there's a couple lightning bolts. You know what? We've had some great past guests, everybody from Les Stroud and the Bear Boys up to Joe Robinettes and Sean Emery's and all kinds of great topics. You know what? Go through there. I'm sure you're going to find a couple of shows that you may have missed or would like to watch that really will pass you some time. Anyways, we'll put it that way. Really quick shout out to all my channel members. Thank you very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated throughout the season. By all means, any of your efforts or anything that you contribute to the channel here really make things go a lot smoother, and they help offset the cost of the channel. One thing that I am considering, and I have to share this because it kind of, I don't like saying it, but I'm going to have to, and that's I may be putting an end to our swag giveaways just because it is costing me far too much money. It all comes out of my pocket, the swag that I put together, with the exception of things that are donated by, the sponsors here and stuff like that. But the mailing costs and the costs of producing, certain swag items is just getting a little too steep for this guy right now. And that's where support from the viewers comes. It goes back into that stuff. So, I'm not running around and throwing $100 bills around with, saying that I'm making all kinds of money with YouTube, because I'm not. I'm doing this because I love it, but I may be putting a stop to the swag giveaway. So there probably won't be a swag giveaway starting tonight. Yeah, sorry to say that. Anyways, also, just if you're looking to future shows, follow me on Facebook at CANOEHOUND'S Outdoor Adventure Show. The link is in the description below, and you'll know exactly what's coming up on the show, when we're going to have breaks, who we're going to have as guests or topics and things like that. And I always try to post in there exactly what's coming up with the channel, so everybody is well informed. And also, if you have any comments too, but if you have any guests that you'd like to see on the show or topics, it makes it a lot easier on me if I know what you want to see. Drop me an email here at canoehound@gmail.com, and I will do my darndest to make it happen. I could put these things onto a list, and I could do my research in the background on those days off, and try and get these shows lined up. So if you have ideas, that's the email you want to send it to. And then also tonight's topic, there's going to be a lot of questions out there. So please just put your question in the comment section over there, but put the word question before it so it makes it easier for me, a one-man show, to recognize it. I will start, and I will try to get to it throughout the show at some point. But once again, at about the 8 o'clock mark, I'm also going to open up the show to anybody that wants to come on and maybe ask a question of our panelists. Both our panelists you have all met and seen before, so you're going to be very familiar with them. And yeah, that is that for that. So let's get on with tonight's topic, because it's a really cool topic that we're going to add some heat to. Our first guest on tonight's show is a favorite of everybody's. He's always on the show, and he's everybody's favorite happy camper. He's the author of several canoeing books, including the Winter Camping Guide, which I'm supposed to have here. I got it here. I forgot to pull it out to show it. But anyways, he's got his second edition of the Guide to Winter Camping. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Kevin Callan. How you doing, Kevin?
Woo! Woo! Woo!
That's the one here. I gotta dig it out. I feel silly because I don't have it. There it is.
Dennis, I mailed you one, and I rubber stamped it. I don't sign books anymore. I rubber stamp them.
Oh well, you better charge up that ink blotter there. It's really faint. I don't see it.
What's up? Really?
I'm kidding. Anyways, great book. Right. I had the first edition, and I lent it to somebody, and of course, I got to be like the library. I got to have a checkout system, right? So,
right.
Anyways, if anybody wants a copy of Kevin's book, the link is in the description below. Feel free to click on that and pick yourself up one, because you're going to learn a lot about winter camping. Anyways, we got somebody else going to join us here, Kevin. Our next guest is also a regular on the show. He's been on here quite a few times. He's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to backcountry camping adventures, especially in the wintertime. He's also an instructor for Algonquin Base Camp Adventure Outfitter and Supply. Please welcome to the live stream our good friend, Pine Martin. How you doing, Martin?
Good evening.
I hope we're not talking about ice fishing.
No, we're not.
So, boys, are we going to try and warm people up tonight?
Yeah, at least keep them from freezing. Yes.
Awesome. Well, you know what? There's a lot to cover on this, because there's so much. When it comes to winter camping, there's so many things that you have to plan. It's a lot more, I guess, in depth than it would be if you're doing a backcountry camping trip in the summertime, where you have a simple list, or that you could just follow. It's easy to stay warm. So, like, you bring the summer bag or the 2-season or 3-season bag, you're all cool. But when you're out there in the wintertime, it automatically, from the time you leave your door till the time you get back, becomes a survival situation, right? To stay comfortable and warm. Would you not agree?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just not dressed right and you're not equipped and you don't have the requisite knowledge, you can become hypothermic in 45 minutes. The difference between winter camping and summer camping is that when things go wrong in winter, they go very wrong, very seriously, because you become incapacitated. You lose the use of your hands, for instance. It happened to me one time when I was quite young. And, within about 45 minutes, I lost the use of my fingers. I could not zip up my jacket, which I had unzipped because I'd overheated. So I went from too hot to freezing cold, so cold I couldn't zip up my jacket, and I was in a bad situation. So, yeah, it could be potentially life-threatening. I don't want to scare people away from winter camping.
No.
You usually end up in that kind of situation. But, yeah, there is that risk. There's some elementary precautions you have to take and some elementary gear needs. But once you've got that under your belt, you're going to be fine. It's not a life and death situation. But yeah, and the nights are particularly cold. It's important that you get through those and not just survive them. You want to be comfortable. You want to sleep. You want to wake up and feel refreshed the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Pine Martin, didn't you just 2 weeks ago take some new people winter camping for the first time? You guided a trip, didn't you?
Yeah, there've been a few so far. But yeah, a few weeks ago I took a couple. They were, I guess, they were late 30s, early 40s, and they had some backpacking experience, quite a bit actually. They're not new campers, but they'd never been winter camping at all. So they signed up for a 3-day hot tenting course that I was leading and instructing. And so it was just the three of us, and I guided them out there. We conducted it out on Crown land, and they had a fantastic time. And the morning that we left was minus 34. And I know they were apprehensive. I could see it on their faces. You know, they're very happy to see me. It was all smiles, but I could tell there was some nervousness as we were packing up, because that's the coldest part of the trip, is getting the gear out of the car and everything packed onto the sleds. It's not exactly high energy work, right? You're not hauling or anything like that. You start to warm up once you haul the sleds, but at first, boy, it's cold. So yeah, they were pretty apprehensive, but we had a wonderful time, and no, nobody was really cold. Cold feet for a little bit. A couple of times they got some cold feet, but they used those little toe warmers, and then they were fine.
Mm-hmm.
Great,
Yeah.
great, yeah.
So I thought I would start this off kind of by showing people there's 4 real ways that you can actually, how your body loses heat. And I think by showing that, maybe quickly explaining it, then by sharing all the tips that we're going to share with everybody, we'll kind of nip all those 4 ways of losing heat kind of in the butt, right? So I'm gonna put up a graphic here. Tonight I have a little bit of show and tell graphics here to go along with what we're talking about. So our lose heat one, here we go. Let's see here if I can get us on screen too. No, is that gonna work? No. Okay, so we'll just talk about it here. How does your body lose heat? The 4 different ways: you have evaporation, you have radiation, conduction, and convection. Evaporation basically is causing of effect that your body loses about 85% of its heat through sweating during intense exercise, and thereby sometimes making your clothing wet or sweaty, especially if you're wearing cotton, which is what, a no-no, right? The other thing is radiation. Radiation causes heat to move away from the body. The body may lose more than 50% of its heat from radiation at temperatures under 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius. Tonight we'll be talking Fahrenheit and Celsius if we can, because we have people from both sides of the border. The third way is conduction. Conduction is the transfer of heat from physical contact. Conduction occurs at about 68 degrees or 20 degrees Celsius and is responsible for the loss of body heat from sleeping on the cold ground. So basically, if you have your insulation underneath you, the ground is actually going to leach that heat out of your body and sort of suck it through, into the ground. And what happens there is when your body starts leaching heat from the bottom, then you're going to get cold on top because you're not generating the heat. Your body is fighting that whole system, right? The other thing, convection. Convection occurs when heated fluid, liquid, or gas travels away from a source. So in other words, it gives an example of a hot cup of tea, but if you look at a literal one, have you ever had sweaty hands inside your glove? You take your gloves off and you can see a steam coming off your hands. That's basically the idea of convection. That's the way I like to look at it. So these are 4 different ways that we can lose heat from our bodies. So which one of them you think is the most important thing to try and nip in the butt first?
Boy, that's hard. Well, I always warn people first about evaporative cooling. That was the first one. That happens from sweating, really. People sweat. They wear too much clothes. So people have heard me pontificate before about riding the cool edge or walking the cool edge, not overdressing. When you get out of the car and you first head out, that's the biggest thing, is people get sweaty. And then what ends up happening is towards the end of the day, their base layers, maybe even their mid layers, are laden with moisture. And once the temperature drops and the activity level drops and you're not moving around as energetically, you start to get that cold, clammy feeling. And if you do not have a dry base layer to switch into, or some other dry layer of clothes to get into when you get into your sleeping bag, you are carrying that into your sleeping bag with you. And now you have to, through evaporative cooling, dry out your own base layer in your sleeping bag. And you've got to force through your body heat, force that moisture to be expressed right through your sleeping bag and out. And that is going to cost you a lot of calories, and you will probably get to shivering. So the biggest thing I worry about always is people sweating. I don't worry too much when I take people out or when I go out if I feel uncomfortably cool. I don't want to be cold, I don't want to be shivering, but uncomfortably cool, I don't care. But boy, if you get sweaty, you're in trouble. And if you're in a hot tent, it's not a big deal. In the evening when you're cooking, you can disrobe, you can get right down to your underwear, hang your clothes up, and it'll dry out, and it's not such a big deal. But if you are cold camping in a cold 4-season tent or a Quincy or an igloo, Or if you are sleeping cold at night in a cold tent and you didn't remember to dry out your clothes, you're going to be in for a cold night unless you decide you're going to keep that stove going all night. And I have some thoughts on that with respect to sleeping warm as well.
Cool. So we'll probably get into the whole clothing thing. Now, a lot of people have this theory of like more is better. Is more better when you're actually in your sleeping bag, or is like, you know, sleeping with just a base layer or in the nude, even for that fact? Don't look so concerned, Kevin.
Okay, Kevin seems to be dumbfounded by the question. So I hear conflicting reports all the time. I know people who say if you sleep nude, it's actually warmer. And they say that because they say what happens is your clothing actually insulates you from the rest of your sleeping bag. That is, it's hard for you to warm up your sleeping bag. Your sleeping bag has no warmth unless you pre-warm it with like an Nalgene full of hot water or something like that, and it doesn't warm it up a lot. Unless you pre-warm your sleeping bag, you have to warm your sleeping bag. You have to expend calories and body heat into your sleeping bag to fill that loft up with your body heat. Until it's warmed by your body heat, there's no warmth gathering around you. It's just slowly diffusing out into the bag, and some of it diffuses out of the bag over time. So what some people say is if you actually sleep nude, you more quickly warm up your bag. If you wear a lot of layers between you and your bag, it takes longer for your sleeping bag to warm up. The contrary view is, who cares if it takes longer for my sleeping bag to warm up? If the heat is trapped inside my layers, inside my garments, between me and my garments, who cares if my sleeping bag takes longer? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have never tried sleeping nude in a sleeping bag. I think I did it once, but I didn't get through the night because I found it cold. Now I'm skinny, so maybe that's part of it. Some people sleep cold, some people sleep hot. I'm a skinny guy. I get cold very, very easily. I hate being cold, which is why I've sort of made it my religion to learn how to stay warm in the cold. Yeah. So I wear a base layer, a thin base layer. It can be merino wool or it can be synthetic. It's not the thinnest layer. I kind of go for a slightly, intermediate layer, but I'm not wearing the big fuzzy pajamas or anything like that. But I wear bottoms, I wear socks, I wear a top, and it can be synthetic because I'm not too worried about sweating because it's not going to be energetic. So I can save my merino wool for the daytime, my more expensive layers. I wear a hat. If your feet get cold, put a hat on is the rule, right? So I always sleep with a hat. Sometimes I'll put on down booties. So I find having layers in there helps. And I sleep warm enough that way that I can actually take my damp base layer when I'm cold camping that I've taken off now because it's damp, and I bring it into my bag, and I actually just drape it around and on me in my sleeping bag, and I take my wool felt liners from my pack boots or whatever mucklucks or moccasins that I'm wearing, and if they're damp, I put them in my sleeping bag and I night dry them. My body heat will express the moisture out of them slowly over the night. I don't know that I could do that if I was sleeping nude, but that's something people might want to experiment with. I hear conflicting opinions.
Here's a really interesting comment by David over at Really Big Monkey 1. He says sleeping nude will ruin a down bag because body oils get absorbed by the bag. I could think that or understand that would be true.
I just like to make a statement. So all of you guys basically go solo, I guess, right?
No, not always. I go with groups.
Okay,
yeah, not always.
So if you don't want to sleep naked because you're going to get cold, that's where I'm going here.
Yeah. I personally don't sleep naked either. I like having my base layer on too, or even sometimes a pair of fleece track pants and maybe a fleece sweater or something along that lines. I like to be cozy. I think the heat gets through to my bag.
I'm just joking. So basically, to go over what Pi Martin was saying, my whole thing is whether you're with someone or not, whatever. I don't sleep naked in the wintertime. Well, it depends. But the idea is during the day, I'm wearing merino wool, layering merino wool. So everybody says if you sweat, you die, right? They're absolutely right. You will sweat. Have you ever tried to pull a freight toboggan through thick snow, through ice, slush on the lake? You're going to sweat.
Yep.
Okay. So with merino wool, what happens is that your sweat is going to move from your body into the wool. And what's good about merino wool, and merino wool is not a brand, it's a type of wool. It's just a lighter wool than, you know, the wool that your grandma made for Christmas, right? So what happens is that's going to crystallize if it's really cold. I mean, that's the thing. I don't really like winter camping if it's less than -10 Celsius. I mean, if it's above that, it's great time. But if it's too warm, that's where things are going to go bad, right? So, but if it's -20, it's going to freeze. I shake the crystals off my sweater when I have my tea for a break. That moisture has left. It's not on my skin, right? So with this, the anorak, I breathe through it. Right here is socio hair fur. I breathe on it during the day. The moisture goes there. I shake it off. It falls off. When I get to camp, whether I'm cold tenting or hot tenting, I remove all this layer, and that's tough. You don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you remove it all and put new stuff on, especially your socks. Go inside your sleeping bag that you've shaken, especially if it's a down bag, to air it out. You go inside that bag and you do a whole bunch of sit-ups, push-ups to get the heat going. And you're probably pretty good. The only thing that's going to get cold is your face because it's outside of your bag. And the moisture from that is going to get to the bag and then get it all wet. Mm-hmm. So we'll show you, how to deal with that, because I think that's a major problem. If you're cold at a -30, if you've done all what I just said and you're still cold, it's because your bag sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're not layered up proper, which we'll get into that there, because, Ontario Outdoor Explorer asked a question here about, would your body drying your clothes in your bag work after multiple nights, or is your bag going to gather moisture over time? And I'm thinking that it would, but it's important to actually dry your bag out if you can during the day, right?
Again, it all depends if you're cold tenting or hot tenting. If you're hot tenting, you can dry everything out. That's why I love hot tenting. If you're cold tenting, you're going to have to try to dry things inside your bag with your own body heat. It's not perfect, but that's what you're going to have to do. So just bring extra layers. So don't sleep in the stuff that you wore all day trekking down the trail if you're cold tenting, because you might and this is what's going to happen to you. You're like, oh, it's really cold. If I just get inside this sleeping bag, get all cozy, I'll be good. Oh yeah, I'm exhausted. That was a really hard day. Why did I ever do this? You get inside the bag, and then 2 hours later, you wake up and you're damp and clammy, and that's not good at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a thought about that question that was just asked. So your sleeping bag is designed to express moisture, right? The outside of your sleeping bag is not waterproof. And it's not waterproof because the moisture that escapes your body all night long has to permeate the bag. What happens is there's hot air in the bag. It's laden with moisture. It migrates through the loft on its way out. And the closer it gets to the outside, the cooler it gets, right? It reaches the dew point. It turns to liquid, hopefully by the time it's on the outside of the bag, and collects as frost on the outside of the bag. If that's not happening, if you're not finding frost on the outside of your bag, and you're finding in the morning that the outside of your bag is damp, what's happening is the outside of your bag is, or rather the sleeping bag itself, is not thick enough. And what's happening is the moisture-laden air is cooling down too quickly. It's reaching the dew point inside the bag, in your insulation, not on the outside. And so that's a good way actually to tell if your sleeping bag is actually not warm enough for the particular temperature that you're in and the amount of moisture you express. Now, people generate different amounts of moisture. Some people sweat more. And the bigger a person you are, the more you're likely to sweat. You're a bigger area. You're going to express more moisture that way than skinny people. Skinny people, such as myself, tend not to vent out tons of moisture. So I don't find a lot of frost on my sleeping bag, but other people sometimes do. So that's a sort of a good check. Look to see if there's frost on the outside of your sleeping bag when it's really cold. On a milder night, you won't notice it. But in principle, if your sleeping bag has enough loft, enough insulation, it should not be accumulating moisture night after night after night. right? There will be some accumulation. That's inevitable unless you're in a hot tent and can dry it out. Kevin's absolutely right about that. But in principle, you should be able to go many nights before the insulation in your sleeping bag is compromised by moisture.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So let's talk about layering your systems. Okay, a lot of the cold doesn't only come from the top. A lot of the cold comes from leaching out through the bottom of your body, or like through the bottom of your bag if you're not properly insulated on the bottom. Have another graphic for everybody, and let's see if I can get this up here to once again, so everybody can have a look at it. And it would be this one here. Layering your sleep system. You could see that whether you're sleeping on a snow or maybe even you might be hot tenting and you're on a cot or something along that lines, you should always have a vapor barrier, something that's going to stop any moisture from coming up through the base, whether it's snow or just any damp, cold air from coming up. So you can see that there's actually a layer there with at the very bottom, which in this case looks like it might be a white tarp. Then you have a foam pad. These are very popular nowadays, the folding type, which is a Thermarest, I think, Z-Lite. And then they have roll-up types or any type of closed cell foam pad. And then, of course, your mattress should go on top of that. And that should be a mattress that has what's called an R value, or it should contain some sort of R value. The higher, the better. As well as your foam pad should also contain an R value. And then your sleeping bag on top. So is there anything else we could add to that, guys?
So you're missing this whole thing that snow is a good thing, depending. So snow is your insulator. So yep. You got to travel in the bush a lot to realize that snow is your advantage out there. It's not a disadvantage. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a hot tent and the snow is melting and there's not much snow and it's icy snow, then the cold is going to come from underneath you and get you cold. But don't think that snow is your enemy out there for sure. Like I do exactly what you showed, the system. The one thing I add is I get this thing here. This is really cheap at the hardware store. It's pipe insulation, costs you nothing. And I put that down. Actually, I put this down first. This is a reflector blanket. So I put this down first, put that down, and then I get a really expensive that I saved forever to get. This is air mat that has down insulation in it, so I'm up above. And then I got my sleeping bag and everything else. But when you make camp, make sure you compact the snow and put snow around the tent, whether you're cold tenting or hot tenting. In fact, I would say cold tenting, the snow is more to your advantage for insulation than hot tenting. Because when you're hot tenting, because the snow is melting in the hot tent because the stove, and then it's creating cold temperatures below. Mm-hmm. But don't go and tell everybody that the snow is your enemy.
Did I say that? No, I didn't.
No, you didn't. Yeah. Yes, you did.
I'm sorry.
No.
By all means, snow has some great insulating properties. You just take a look when you go ice fishing or something. If you bury your hole at nighttime before you're ready to turn in, you go back out the next morning and you might have a frosting of ice on it, but for the most part, it'll just be a slush hole, right? So yeah, you got some great insulating properties there for sure with the snow. The whole thing there is like, I guess we should talk about the importance of each layer underneath your sleeping bag, though.
Yeah, can I say something about layers under your sleeping bag? Because
sure.
There's a lot of people like cots. And cots are great because they're super comfortable. But you're going to have the problem of convection. You're going to have the problem of cold air passing underneath you. And so now you're not lying on the snow, which is cold, but better than lying on ice, which really does conduct heat very, very quickly, whereas snow is, as Kevin said, a pretty good insulator. Nevertheless, the snow is still 0 degrees, so it's still going to bleed heat out of you. So you do have to be insulated from the snow. But a cot, all you've got is cold air. Now, the cold air under your cot is usually much colder than the snow. It's paradoxical, or at least it's counterintuitive, but it is in fact true. That cold air at night is going to be colder. And so you're going to need even better insulation if you're sleeping on a cot. Now, some people need a cot. They find that they simply, because of back trouble and stuff like that, or they're just more comfortable on a cot. That's fine. But just understand that the cot being off the snow is not affording you any added insulation. It's a reduction in insulation, effectively, because you're actually sleeping on a colder medium. than if you were sleeping right on the snow. I'm like Kevin. I have one of those downfield bags. It took me a number of years to save up for one of these, but they're great, and it's not a lot bigger than like my old Thermarest. I use it year round. I use it in summer as well. And instead of a closed cell foam pad, I use one of these, which is also closed cell foam. The Z-Light that you showed in your photograph.
Open that up and show everybody.
Sure, it's sort of an accordion. It's kind of got a sort of mylar silvery reflective coating on one side, and it's yellow on the other. It also makes a great sit pad because you can fold it into different configurations. You don't have to extend it or keep it folded this way. It's a little bit more compact, travels a little better than a rolled up closed cell foam pad. But the dimpling, the sort of egg carton dimpling on this, I find adds some insulation and is more comfortable to sleep on than the closed cell foam, which gets compressed very easily. Like when you roll over on your side and you're kind of bony like me, you get your shoulder digging through it and stuff like that. So I actually find this superior. It's more expensive accordingly, but I find it better. And one thing I have learned, and I actually had to experiment with this. I actually had to go back and forth one night and the other. Which one goes on the bottom? Do I put this down first and then my air-filled downfield mat on top, or do I do it the other way around? And I've tried, and I've noticed there's a distinct difference. I find that if I put this closer to the ground and I put this on top, I'm warmer. And I've tried it. I've gone back and forth. I thought, why? Now, the difficulty is that this is wider, and so it sort of, it's easier to just lay this out and then put this on top. Things stay in place. If I put them the other way, this has a tendency to sort of slide off the air pad, right? But I find a little bit of shock cord wrapped around keeps things in place. But I found that this on top works better than this. And part of the reason I think is this, and this is speculation on my part, but it's scientifically seems to make sense. This is filled with air. There's no warm air in here, right? I mean, you might blow into it, but over the course of the night, it loses its heat. Air has to be kept warm. So the dead air that's in here has to be kept warm by your body heat. Otherwise, it will drop to the temperature of the tent around you or whatever shelter you're in, be it a snow shelter or whatever. So you have to keep this warm, okay? This is harder to keep warm as a thermal mass than this. So I think your body has an easier time of keeping this warm when it's pressed against you than this. I think this actually leaches heat out of you a little faster than this does. That's the only reason I can offer as to why putting them, in the reverse way that most of us would want to put them makes a difference. But I have tried the experiment. I have a backyard igloo, and I've tried it a few times, just again this season, to make sure I'm not imagining things. And I sleep decidedly warmer with this on top of this. But you have to sort of tie it together with some shock cord or something like that. Otherwise, the pad will slip off of the air mattress.
Mm-hmm. Did everybody catch what Martin said there? He says in his backyard igloo. How many people in the chat can honestly say they have a backyard igloo?
Like 4 or 5 this year.
Yeah.
But one in my backyard.
What about yourself, Kevin? Have you tried that yourself? Putting the foam pad on top of your
no, that's a new point. Actually, I learned something every day, and I didn't think of that. I do know that if you're going to use boughs, which is not proper in a provincial park, but if you're in Crown Land, whatever, you can use boughs. It's a catch-22 because if you use spruce boughs, black spruce or white spruce, but if you're up the north, it's black spruce. It's more aerated, which helps because the needles grow around the twig, so therefore it's like a cigar. So it aerates you up more than balsam. However, if you use spruce, after a couple of days, you will smell like cat pee.
I've heard that.
Disgusting. Where balsam, you'll smell like a Christmas tree. So when I travel with the First Nations people up in north of Wawa or up in northern Quebec, they all use balsam for a couple of reasons. One is it smelled better, and they would all look at me like you stink, and they wouldn't tell me why, and they just laugh at me. And that's great. I loved it. And the other was because the balsam is a weed tree. So if you delimb the lower part of the balsam, you're not really doing anything bad to the environment. In fact, you're helping it because it's like pulling a weed out of your garden. So, yeah.
So you're saying the pines or the black spruce, that's the ones that have needles all around the.
Yeah, not a pine, but like a spruce. So when you look at a spruce, like a conical spruce,
Yeah.
Needles grow around the twig almost like a cigar. So when you put that on and weave it on the ground, you're aerated from the snow, right?
Yeah.
But if you put balsam, then you're flattered to it. So it's a give and take. You don't want to smell those, so use balsam.
The smell will actually leach into your system.
Oh, no, seriously. If you put a spruce Christmas tree in your garage for like 2 months, you can't get rid of that smell. It does smell like cat pee.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Didn't know that. Well, I heard something about that. I didn't know it was true, though.
Can I add something about sleeping pads?
Sure.
So these down-filled pads, and any sleeping pad actually, as I said, it's filled with air. The air is supposed to insulate you. The reason we have air-filled sleeping pads, though, is not so much to insulate us as to be comfortable. They're like a mattress. They're supposed to be cushy, right? This has got some down in it. So just like your sleeping bag, you want to loft it up. So you want to inflate this early, not just before you go to sleep, because you want the down fibers inside to sort of unfurl and loft up just like you would with your sleeping bag. So you got to unpack your sleeping bag early after you set up, not just before you're about to crawl into it when everything is all compressed. But the other thing is, and this is a trick I learned from Shug Emery. He said this in connection with hammock camping, and I found it to be true. He says, if you're cold at night, let some air out of your pad. You'll be warmer. And I thought, that's weird. Don't you want all that air in there? But actually, no, you have to warm that air, right? So having too much air is actually not a great thing. And of course, there's a ratio of downfill to air. And obviously, the more air, the less insulation, right? Because the air is not really doing anything to insulate you. So let some air out of your pad, and it makes a difference. And so I have found a significant difference. I used to inflate my pad, as far as I could. And now what I do is I blow it up, or I have a schnozzle bag that fills it up. And then in the cold temperature, you know how the air contracts and then your bag kind of softens. It's not as, right? I don't reinflate it to get it, full up again. I just leave it kind of soft. And I find I sleep warmer on this pad when it's not just plumped up all the way, but when it's actually a little bit soft. I find that actually affords me a better insulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? I do the same thing with my sleeping pad. I will never blow them up firm. I'm a firm believer that they have it set at the factory when they make these things that the self-inflating type anyways will self-inflate to their maximum capacity. Anything more than that, you're just blowing up a balloon, right? If you let it blow up to its own capacity, then you have exactly that. But the problem is too with especially with a lot of the cheaper underpads, is that they don't inflate very good. The material gets very brittle with cold weather. The foam might not expand like it should with cold weather. So you really have to warm those things up, and that's where a good quality underpad comes into play for a self-inflating type is something that's designed to work in cold temperatures, right? So, yeah. Okay, I want to start at the very bottom again here, because I know we're into the pads, but for layering systems, Kevin, you showed you had the sort of that Reflectix furnace cover. I've got the same thing here. Yeah, okay. So that would be like a base layer, and then something like this with reflective properties. Do you think reflective properties really help?
Well, they don't hurt,
right? I'm just wondering about the reflective, the theory of reflecting heat versus light. They're made to reflect light, I think. I just wonder if there's any take on that. Like,
that's a good point. The reason why I use this, it cost me $2.
Yeah.
And I can't see that being a negative, being on the snow compared to just the tarp.
Mm-hmm.
And this, well, I had it in my pack. Why not?
Yeah.
Whether it's supposed to be reflective, it's a reflective emergency blanket from SOL, whatever. So I can't see that being a negative. Here's a debate too about, so I also will bring this. It's a bivvy. Mm-hmm. And Martin, you tell me what you would do. So I would take this if temperatures get really bad and you have a bad sleeping bag. This will supposedly give you 10 degrees more warmth. So some people say they put this in the sleeping bag and they put their body over it. or other people say they put this over their sleeping bag. The idea is this is supposed to reflect heat and then also is breathable. It's not one of those emergency bags marathon runners wear when they come over the finish line. It's a breathable one. So I don't know. Like it all depends how much heat you're putting out, because this could get wet inside your bag, or it could get wet outside the bag, or it could be fantastic and add 10 more degrees. I'm not sure. But I do always pack this in case one night I'm thinking, oh, like I'm not doing well. At least I have this.
But is a bivy not made more for protection from the elements from the outside? Like, would that not be used to deter wind or something if you weren't inside of a tent?
Yeah, but this is the one you get a cane tire or whatever that actually is breathable. So it's not one of those ones, again, it's not one of those ones that everybody puts over people running across the marathon race and because they're hypothermic, right? Or whatever. This is actually to help you out inside or outside the bag. I've tried both. Both work. I do find that in a hot tent, I think that's the problem is you get too hot. I mean, everybody's talking about how to keep warm. You get a hot tent. As long as you get my buddy Andy that has to pee every 20 minutes, you're fine. He just puts wood in. He's fine. But if you're cold tenting, then this might be an extra thing, especially if you don't have the money to buy a winter bag. Think of it, guys. You're talking a good bag, -35 bag, and not when they say extreme. When they say extreme, that company doesn't know what they're talking about. They're just trying to sell you a bag. There's no such thing as extreme. When it says it's rated to -35 degrees Celsius, but if you can't afford that, my buddy Andy, he brings 2 fall bags, right? I've got a winter bag. I saved up $600. I bought a really good one, but he just brings 2 fall bags. But we hot tent. I mean, I cold tent and I go under a tarp, but he wouldn't do that because he's like, well, you're an idiot. And so when we go in a hot tent, he wakes up, urinates in his pee bottle, which is important too. We should talk about.
Yeah, we'll
you
get
don't
to
go
that.
outside to pee, male or female. You find a way to pee in that jar, because the moment you unzip, get out, your temperature of your body changes dramatically, right? But it's a mental thing. If you keep that urine in your body, you're going to get cold because your body's trying to keep that urine warm. Get rid of it. You don't want it in your body.
Yeah.
So get a pee bottle, label it. Make sure Andy goes with you, so he'll put wood on the stove every time he has to pee. And,
I gotta throw a little plug in there because I actually just ordered one of these. Cabela's right now currently has their -37 canvas camping bag. It's a heavy bag, but they're on sale right now for $129.
But canvas? You said canvas?
Well, the outer they call it canvas, but I don't think it's really canvas, but they're. I got a couple buddies that have them, and they say they're pretty good bags.
What's the weight of that, though?
They're heavy. They're heavy bags. You're not going to take them backcountry. You're going to use them for front country camping, like New Lake or something like that.
If you're doing front country and that's all the money you have, take the bag, and then if all else fails, go in your car.
Yeah. But they're $100 off, $129. Just thought everybody might like to know that in case they want to grab one.
Or you know what, though? Just rent a bag. Outfitters rent bags. And you might say, well, I'm not going to rent a sleeping bag. Who's been in that before? Take that. Or actually what I've done is get a fleece liner or a wool blanket liner and sewed it together. And I use that. And it's awesome. Saves you a lot of money.
Yeah.
All right. So
something about bivvies.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dennis, you're right. Bivy bags are sort of intended to keep the elements off you. So they're supposed to keep, blasting wind off of you. They're supposed to keep snow and rain and that sort of off you. You're supposed to be wearing, or not wearing, but in a bivy bag when you don't have a tent, right? A bivy bag is going to prevent one of the most essential functions of your sleeping bag, and that is to vent moisture. Right, moisture will get trapped inside, even if it's supposed to be a breathable layer. Some moisture will get trapped because it'll reach that dew point. It'll liquefy and it'll then condense on the outside of your bag and wet out your bag, and that moisture then migrates back down the fibers into your sleeping bag. So I avoid bivy bags unless I'm more concerned about the outside elements getting in than I am about moisture getting out. So I don't use a bivy bag. That being said, I have a ditch kit that I carry with me. And when I go on trips with other people, I have a whole other kit for everybody else. There's a complete kit in here in case the hot tent burns down or something like that, or there's a catastrophe, we get separated from our gear, I have a complete sleep system for everybody. It includes a tarp, a bivvy and stuff like that, that will get you through the night. So I do carry one of those breathable bivvies. I don't use it as an extra layer for my sleeping bag. What I would use is probably what Kevin suggested, is a fleece liner. Now, I don't know that it doesn't work. I don't know that it's going to create a condensation problem because I haven't tried it firsthand. I'm told that it will, and I understanding the principles as I do, I predict that it would, or over time, accumulate moisture in your bag. But for one night, I don't think it would make any difference. It would only add warmth. But I use a fleece liner inside, so I'm careful with these breathable things as a way of supplementing the R value of my sleeping bag. With respect to those blankets, those emergency blankets, I have one as well. I use that as my ground cloth in an igloo or in my hot tent. It's sort of plastic coated on one side, and it's got a kind of mylar-like metallic shiny side on the other. You got to be careful when people talk about how it reflects heat. It reflects heat. That is to say, it reflects infrared light. Okay, so you're talking about long wave radiation being reflected at you. It gets reflected back. But when you're touching it with your skin, okay, you are conducting heat through it and out of your body faster than any long wave radiation can be beamed back at you to benefit from that warmth. Okay, so there's a net loss. So if you're going to wear one of those blankets, wear it plastic side in, silver side out. Okay, that will be less cold than having that silver right around you, especially if you're bare skinned in an emergency or something like that. So be careful with those emergency blankets. They always depict them with the colored plastic outside and the silvery one around, the shivering half-naked person who's just come out of the freezing water or something like that. You don't want it that way. You want it the other way.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, do you have a system for tying, say, for instance, your foam pad and your sleeping pad together so that they're not shifting through the night, so they're not doing this or,
Yeah. I use shock cord. I just go out and take that elastic cord, just go out and get a few feet of it, and I just tie it into a loop, into a circle that's a little bit more taut than both of those things together, and I just stretch it over both layers. And I have two. I have one closer to the head, one closer to the foot, and it prevents them from slipping off each other. And it's especially important if you're going to do what I try to do, which is put my air pad underneath my closed cell foam pad.
Right.
But that doesn't always work. I mean, depending on the shape of your air mattress, it might not work. Like you might have too narrow and tapering a pad, and you might have to do it the other way. But if you don't want one to slip off the other, shock cord works really, really well. Also, if you want to sort of cozy up with your honey and you both have two pads and you want to sleep pressed against each other, even if you're in separate sleeping bags, you don't want to sort of end up having your pads slide apart and falling in onto the uninsulated area between you. Use shock cord around both of your pads. But what you do is you take that loop of shock cord and you put a knot in the middle. So it's kind of like a figure eight. It's two loops like this. Okay. And then one pad goes in one loop and one pad goes in the other. You do that at the bottom, you do that at the top. And now they won't overlap each other. They won't get pulled in together by the shock cord, but nor can they slide apart, right? So this solves what I call the cuddle problem.
The cuddle problem. Yeah, that makes sense. I got a buddy who actually, we talked about sleeping bag liner that you can make out of fleece. My buddy actually makes one, or he has one for both his sleeping pads will go inside of this thing, and it just keeps them bundled together, and it adds a little layer of like fabric rather than a cold slippery or something that if you lay on foam, how you can get that sweating, but you're not going to get sweating anyways because you've got a sleeping bag. But yeah, it's just another way of keeping these things together. But I like your idea because it's a lot more lightweight and compact. Yeah, by all means. I use Velcro now because shock cord after a while can puncture things. So Velcro works well. And also shock cords are great, but they weigh a lot more than Velcro. So I just super glue Velcro in different sections, and that's how I put stuff together. Oh, so you cut like pieces of Velcro and put it right on your pads? Yeah, it gives me something to do at night, like really. Yeah.
What kind of adhesive do you use for what kind of adhesive do you use to get the Velcro to stick onto the pad?
Gorilla Glue and dollar store Velcro.
Okay, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we talked about the ground sheets or like a vapor barrier. We talked about closed cell foam pad. We talked about sleeping pad. Let's get on to sleeping bags, because this is something that is a very, very, very costly portion of any winter camping. Building up your gear for that, right? As I mentioned earlier, one place has got a cheaper, or I don't even know how to call it, but not a super expedition style for a low cost, versus you can get up into the thousands of dollars for a high end down-filled sleeping bag. And there, Kevin's going to get his. What do you have for a sleeping bag? What keeps you warm at night there, Mark?
Well, it depends what type of camping I'm doing. So if I were cold tenting, which I never do because I'm not tough enough, or if I'm hot tenting and I sleep cold at night, I have this crazy expensive Marmot CWM. It's $1,000, rated to -40, and it's fantastic. And it's fantastic because it has an enormous amount of downfill. It has a really good, generous collar that cinches around your neck, and then this a cinch around here, so that when I'm in it, like all you can see is this much of my face, right? So it keeps me really, really warm, traps heat very well, and it has enormous baffles, which is this big, huge, puffy stuff here that's right in front of the zipper, and there's one on each half of the zipper. So I don't have heat bleeding out of the sleeping bag through the zipper. I can roll over on the zipper. I won't even feel it because those baffles are so plump and lofty. So it's a really excellent bag. It breathes well. It's extremely crazy expensive. It's downfilled, so it compresses really, really well. But when I igloo camping, I don't bring that. I have a woman's, it's my wife's Never Summer sleeping bag. It's sort of a light rated, sort of 3-season, quasi winter bag. It's too heavy for summer, hence the name Never Summer. It's by Marmot also. I use that. And in an igloo, it never gets so cold that I need something like a -40 bag, because it never gets to -30 or -40 in an igloo. I've never had a water bottle freeze in an igloo or a Quincy once you close up the door properly. So it depends what kind of style of camping I'm doing. And for years, before I got into hot tenting, I was always snow shelter camping, and I always had 3-season bags, and I would double them up, or I'd have a good 3-season bag, and I'd bring a big, thick fleece liner, which Dennis were talking about earlier. I made it myself. I just went to Fabricland. I got a big bolt of fleece. I folded it in half, and I stitched it down the bottom on one side and about 2/3 of the way up one side, leaving a flap with a little bit of Velcro so I could pin it down. And that was my liner. And I found that that added an extra layer of trapped air between me and the sleeping bag itself. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I noticed that if I have to get up to pee or get up to eat or whatever, if I get up in the night and have to get out of the sleeping bag, all the heat that's coming from me, that's warming my sleeping bag, escapes the bag. And when I get inside, that cold nylon feels terrible. I hate it. It's just bone chilling. I can't stand it. But if there's a fleece liner, it's just much more forgiving when you crawl back in. It seems to retain your heat longer than that cold nylon, which just gives it up immediately. I guess it just traps enough air in there between the two layers that it keeps you warmer. So that nylon is nice to get back into. It's very, very forgiving when you have to get out to do something like pee or whatever. And I will second the suggestion of the pee bottle. I always bring a pee bottle. Makes a huge difference. You get that, your body has to heat that thermal mass of urine that's trapped in your bladder, has to keep it at body temperature. So you're wasting calories keeping that warm. If you get that out of there and into the pee bottle, you can even take the pee bottle, throw it into the foot of your sleeping bag, provided you're confident it won't leak. It's an old mountaineering trick. And you take that problem of trying to keep your urine warm in your body and you turn it into a solution by getting it to warm up your bag for you. So it's a good suggestion. Kevin seems incredulous.
Bing, light bulb over his head. Eh?
It's like rolling the dice. Just roll it out. Like pee bottle won't leak. No problem. Oh,
yeah. Haven't had a problem yet. And I even have a little cozy liner that goes around it so that it doesn't bleed out its heat quickly. It sort of leaches out that nice warm urine heat very, very gradually.
You know what? That's fantastic because I'm getting older, and I know it's a family show, Dennis, but if you don't shake enough and something leaks, you can always say, "Well, it was my pee ball that leaked. It wasn't me."
There you go. Yeah, you have somebody to blame, right? It was its fault. No, you know what? And another cool tip is when you do like sneak out of your bag, if you keep yourself a granola bar, usually a sleeping bag will have a little pocket or something in there. Keep a granola bar or a Cliff bar or something in there and eat that after you've gone pee or just before you're going pee or whatever, while you're outside, so that you can start your metabolism going again, burning that furnace inside you, feel like that fuel inside you to warm up your bag quicker, I would think. So that's something I do.
Fatty foods are great for that. I molasses cookies made with butter and molasses and rich in oils and stuff like that. Pemmican, nice fatty foods, bacon, stuff like that is fantastic. You don't have to worry too much about critters in winter. So
your keto diet falls right into that perfectly, doesn't it?
What's that?
Your keto diet plays right into that.
Yeah, well, I'm on a keto diet, so I'm on a high fat diet anyway. But certainly, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I'm not cold, even though I'm like a bag of bones. I'm really skinny. But a fatty diet is a good thing when you're camping. Like, now is not the time to try to lose weight. Your body is going to expend calories like crazy, keeping you warm all day and all night. Some people imagine that it's only while you're active that your body is generating heat. That's not true. Your body will burn brown fat, which is located throughout your body. And brown fat is metabolic fuel. It's what keeps you warm when you're not doing a thing. So you don't have to be, energetically running around and stuff like that to warm yourself up. You can, in fact, warm yourself just lying there or sitting still. Your body's going to burn its brown fat, but your body doesn't want to burn its fat unless it's accustomed to burning fat. So being on a high fat diet helps that, but I'm not trying to plug a diet here, but it does make a difference. But fatty foods and snacks in the middle of the night are fine to get that metabolic furnace going and get you warmed up, right? Don't wait until breakfast, Even if you're not hungry, if you wake up cold in the night, make sure you got a hat on, drink a hot beverage that you've got in a thermos, sitting by your sleeping bag, and have a nice fatty, rich, and sweet snack. If it's just a candy bar, it doesn't matter. Just anything to start digestion and get your metabolic furnace going. It will jumpstart it, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, we'll get into talking about some foods that'll help keep you warm through the night. Kevin, what do you have there? What's your
well, there's two things. One is it's really funny as someone was commenting about left-handed zipper, which is this. That's a good point. I actually spent a little bit more money and got a left-handed zipper on this because I'm left-handed. Mm-hmm. The other thing is it's got this bib, right? So it's around you like this, so you're exhaling. You're not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The other, it's not mummy shaped. This one is it's Neo. It's an old Neo. They don't make them anymore. I forget what brand. Neo Coda. And this is spoon shaped, so it's not mummy shaped. So you're not spending extra energy to heat the entire bag. It's shaped to your body, especially for women. I think you said too, you got a woman's bag, and you explained that because it's shaped more confined to the body, and so the zipper, it's also, I have pockets inside to put stuff in. So if I have, oh my Lord, I got to put stuff here.
That orange bag, that's not a mummy style bag. That's a rectangle.
No, it's shaped like a spoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my first bag was a Mountain Equipment Co-op bag, which is great. I still have it. I let everybody else borrow it, and it was $300. It was good, nothing wrong with it. But I spent $600 quite a while ago. I've had this bag for a while, basically because it's shaped more to your body as opposed to,
Is it a downfilled bag?
Yeah, and
yours is downfilled too, Martin.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The whole thing about down and synthetic, they both have good qualities. Since synthetic, if it gets wet, it's still usable. If down gets wet, it's completely useless. So I prefer down. But going to critters, just remember, if you're camping on base camping in one spot for more than a couple of days, maybe 3 days, mice will know where the heat is. And there's many times in my when I used to work north and would live in a hot tent for a job, mice would be making a nest in my hair, like literally pulling my hair out and making a nest on my head, right? So don't think that there's no critters out there in the winter.
Yeah. Like Martin, you just pointed out this question in the chat here too, and I just marked it as well. In the woods crafting, Mike is asking, how do you transition from clothes to sleeping clothes to warm back up?
It's the simplest trick. You fill up an Nalgene bottle or a thermos that's not too insulating, but something that will express some heat, like a Nalgene bottle. Fill it with warm water, throw it into your sleeping bag, and pre-warm your sleeping bag, and take your night clothes and throw them in there too. And then when you're ready to change out of your day clothes into your night clothes before bed, they're all pre-warmed and toasty. And then take your slightly dampened day clothes that you've been wearing all day, and you will night dry those with you inside the sleeping bag. You're just not going to be wearing them. They'll just be sort of littered around you inside the sleeping bag, and the moisture in them will be expressed by your body heat. So yeah, just pre-warm your sleeping bag with an Nalgene bottle. It doesn't warm up the whole bag. The bag's too big and lofty and insulating one part against the other, so it's actually hard to warm up the whole bag with just one Nalgene bottle. But you can certainly pre-warm your night clothes just by wrapping them around this and throwing the whole thing into the sleeping bag. That's what I do every time, and it's so luxurious.
Well, that's two Nalgenes of liquid you have in your sleeping bag, one full of urine and one full of water. I guess you want to make sure you have them well marked, right, so you don't get them mixed up in the morning.
This one is yellow, so there's no mistake.
Yeah. Put all the X's on there, or duct tape around it there with ridges and stuff, so you know which one isn't the one you're going to drink from. Yeah, for sure. So now, Kevin, you mentioned about synthetic versus down filled. You said when down is wet, it loses its insulation properties.
Well, it completely does. Yeah, it doesn't work because it's soaking wet, right? And to try and dry that down, if you're cold tenting, good luck. It will never dry. Hot tenting, yeah, you can dry it if you take a day off. And synthetic, it gets some knocks, but it's a lot better than you think. It's a lot cheaper too. Well, I wouldn't say that nowadays, but it used to be.
That's what I own.
Yeah. So synthetic is okay. But synthetic is also heavier. Down you can pack a lot smaller than synthetic. And I'm older, but so I would say like 20 years ago that was absolute truth. Now it's not as much that's the case. But this down bag, like seriously, this is a -35 bag, and I can put it down to this, right? That makes a huge difference when you're hauling stuff.
My synthetic bag, I can't get it down less than basketball. Well, maybe overinflated basketball size when it's fully compressed in a cinch sack, right?
Well, it's like going to the Army surplus store and then you see this massive bag like that, and it's good to -40, and it is. It's a great bag, but good luck hauling that in, especially if you're cold tenting and you're not using a toboggan. You can't, right? So yeah, if you're going to Silent Lake or Killarney or the Mule Lake campground, go for it. It's a lot cheaper. Or beg sand and borrow someone else's. But if you're going to go beyond that, and I think that's the problem, is like it's a lot of money. Like if you're going to pay $600 to $1,000 for a sleeping bag and only go once or twice a year for the winter, is it worth it? Probably not.
Yeah, it's an investment. It's something that you have to know you're going to use, just like buying a hot tent or all the winter camping gear. You got to know you're going to use it, right? Yeah. See, now I own a synthetic bag. My bag's probably around 20 years old now, but it's still in good shape because it doesn't get a lot of use. Like, you're using it in my case for up until this year, not very much, maybe once or twice for a couple of days in the wintertime when you go ice fishing or winter camping or whatever it is. But they do have a life expectancy too, right? Most of them.
Yeah, it all depends how you take care of your gear. I'm terrible at taking care of my gear, right? But the moment you get home, hang that bag up somewhere, and so down, so you're not stuffing it all the time, and that would be better for it. And I got to say though, like the down bags 20 years ago are better made than they are today. Like here I am, the old guy again, but But I got an old bag, like the MEC bag. It's pretty darn old, and it was only $300, and it's not one of my favorite bags, but it'll do. And I just make sure when I store it, and I have a really small place. I have a problem with storage, but my tents and my bags get hung the moment I get home.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So now, what about a mummy bag? Do either of you feel claustrophobic? I know I have an issue with mummy bags. I'm a restless sleeper, like to toss and turn, left side to right side to the back and stuff like that. And I find that with a mummy bag, I just can't get comfortable because I like to kick a knee out when I sleep, and you know what I mean. Any tips on that there? How to bypass that, or?
I'm not the best on that. I'm small stature, so I'm 5'10", but I'm like 145 pounds. So I'm really skinny. So I have a mummy bag. It's the regular size. It's not the wide mummy bag for the bigger guys. And I can just spin in my bag. I don't like it when I roll over. I can just roll over inside the bag without it shifting and twisting around me. So I don't have that problem. So I really don't have any good advice for that. Maybe somebody watching will have a good suggestion, but I just. I'm a restless sleeper too. I spin in the night.
Yeah, just curious. I'd like to know, everybody in the chat, how many people out there absolutely hate mummy bags? Put a 1 in the chat if you hate a mummy bag. I'm just curious to know if I'm by myself on this thing. And who are you going to rob, Kevin?
Chico. If you don't like a mummy bag, because the idea of mummy bag is you're contained, so therefore there's less room for you to heat up, right? Yeah. But then what people don't like is that the thing around their head, they zip up. And the problem with that is that it works, but then that's the frost that happens, and that will get all wet. So I wear wool. So I wear mine, but I do not put my sleeping bag hood on. I wear this if it's really cold, and then I also put a wool thing like that.
Yeah. Right,
because that's what's going to get cold.
Yeah.
So you're breathing through your nose. Or no, your mouth, sorry. And that's better than actually doing the mummy bag closed up in your, yeah. And again, wool, I get up in the morning, let it get cold, shake off the moisture. It's good. So,
do you remember, I think it was last year, John from Lost Lakes, he was making some sort of a contraption for his nose for winter camping.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was there. I remember it was pretty funny looking, whatever.
It was. I blame COVID. I think he was getting a little stir crazy.
Stir crazy. Do you remember that there, Martin? Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that one. No, and I watched a lot of his content. I missed that. Actually, the cold nose thing is important. So the way I sleep at night, so I wear a mummy bag, but even in the mummy bag, put on the old beanie. This is a merino wool beanie, and then around my neck, I wear this because I get really cold from the neck. And this keeps my chin, and I can, do this and even do this if it's really cold. But eventually, this will get saturated with moisture if I keep it over my mouth and nose. But I find just doing this really keeps a lot of my face and head warm. But the cold nose,
is that just a fleece buff?
Yeah, this is just a polar fleece thing. I wear it all the time, every day outside, and I like to sleep in it. If it's particularly warm, then I won't wear that because that's the one place where I want heat to escape so I don't get sweaty. But so a sock nose warmer. What I use is a headband. So a lot of people like to wear just a headband, it covers your forehead and your ears. Just take that headband and pull it down over your nose, and it'll keep your nose warm. Psychologically, having a cold nose is one of the things that will keep you up. It'll have you sort of sleeping with one eye open. People who've never winter camped often find that they can be perfectly comfortable in their bag, but they think they're freezing to death because their face is freezing. It is uncomfortably cold. It feels like your nose and face is pressed up against a cold pane of glass. It's really uncomfortable. And people think that until that warms up, they won't sleep. Well, if you think that, you'll stay up. But you just need to understand that, no, it's perfectly fine, right? You will not freeze unless there's a cold wind and you're exposed. You're not going to get frostbite on your nose, and you can always put a bandana or any garment over your nose if you're really worried about frostbite. But chances are in your tent, it's going to be warm enough in that little microclimate that you're not going to get anything like frost nip or frostbite. So just don't worry about having a cold face and a cold nose. But psychologically, it makes a difference. But if you know that it's harmless, it's fine, you will sleep cold that way. As long as the rest of you is warm, it doesn't matter that your face feels cold. You'll stop worrying about it. But I know a lot of people have a hard time falling asleep, especially the first time they've ever been winter camping, because they're waiting for their face to warm up. And speaking of waiting to warm up, we talked about ground insulation. One thing that people sometimes do wrong is they don't have enough insulation beneath them and they don't know it. They feel comfortable inside the bag, but then in the night they notice, let's say they're a side sleeper, under this shoulder, right, that they're leaning on, it starts to feel cold. They feel a cold spot there, or they might feel a cold spot on their hip or on their buttocks or upper back where they're, when they're sleeping on their back. Wherever you feel a cold spot, you have to address it that minute, not in an hour. You will have bled out an enormous amount of heat in that hour. When you feel a cold spot, what that means is there's not enough insulation between you and the ground. And the earth is an endless sink. There's literally an infinite sink for heat. And it will suck heat out of you, as you described before, Dennis. So what do? Well, your sleep system is your sleep system. Well, get up, find a garment, find a sweater, find a mitt, find a hat, a backpack, whatever. Get it in there wherever you feel that cold spot or cold spots, and get yourself up off of the snow or the ground, or if you're on a cot, put more distance and air between you and whatever's cold beneath you. It will never warm up. And people sometimes think, well, eventually that spot will warm up. No, that's impossible. It's a hole in your insulation. It will never warm. And you will get colder and colder and colder. And once you get to a certain point and you're shivering, it's really hard from that point to address the problem and then warm up again, right? You're running a real caloric deficit there. And you're going to have to get up and drink something and eat something. And so just as soon as you feel that cold spot, address it. Just throw something under there. It doesn't matter what it is, and get yourself up, and then you'll be fine. It makes a big difference. And I found that out the hard way a couple of times, where I just thought, I'm just going to muscle through. I'm going to tough my way through this, as if I'm going to heat up the earth with my body.
Right.
Which is really dumb, but that's the way you have to understand it. It's a cold sink.
Another thing a lot of people don't realize too is that a lot of sleeping bags are made with all the loft on top and a lot less loft on the bottom, because that's all going to be compressed anyways, right? Yeah. So if you're a person that tosses and turns a lot, and you're in, say, for instance, a mummy bag or a mummy style bag, and you turn onto your side and you bring the bag with you, now you've got thin insulation at your backside, right? So you're not effectively insulated on the back, which can cause some cold to come through, right? So keep that in mind, people. If your sleeping bag's a lot thicker on top than it is on the bottom, that's the reason, is the lofting. And what have you got, Kevin?
Well, forget this. I just keep I always change my socks at night. That's important. But a lot of people are asking about dogs, so we should talk about that too.
Sure. Yeah.
There's the fourth person there. If it's really cold, I don't bring my dog. My dog does not like winter camping. If I hot tent, that's fine, but it's very anxious for the dog. But I do bring a complete sleep system for the dog. If worst comes to worst, if the dog gets really cold, the dog can go in my bag and we can both keep each other warm. I've done that many times with Angel. She does not like winter camping. She loves camping, but I bring pretty much the same thing that I use, like a sleep system, like a base, and then another base, and then a bag. And she knows it. Like she's not like, what's that? She knows what's going on. But yeah, the problem with dogs, like you can't really, we all communicate with them, but you don't know if they're really, really cold. Well, actually, that's not true. If Angel comes into my bag, she's cold. So
last year I took Molly with me to Mew Lake, and there again I had a system for her too, with the Vapour Barrier, a pad underneath her, and then a down-filled bag on top of her, and she didn't want to poke her head out from the blanket, and she started getting carbon monoxide poisoning from just breathing her own breath underneath the sleeping bag, and ended up puking all over the tent.
I remember you told me that. Yeah.
Oops.
It all depends on the breed too. Like if you have a Malamute, like they're gonna love it. If you have like, it all depends on the breed and if they're used to it. Like Christine's dog, I took it winter camping once, and it slept with me the whole night, or it would have died. So it gets cold in the house, where Angel is more bush savvy. So just be careful of taking dogs. I think it's great you take them, but just make sure that we all forget. It's almost like a first aid kit. I always bring a first aid kit for my dog and for me, because people forget that actually something could happen to the dog. Because you always say, well, it's a dog. Nothing's going to happen to the dog. Mm-hmm. And it could happen. So,
yeah. So we're talking about how expensive sleeping bags can actually be. What about somebody that's just starting out? You don't have the $800 bag. You don't have the underpads that can amount to a few $100s on top of the sleeping bag cost. Let's talk about some hacks that people can use to sort of get started with winter camping and still have a comfortable night's sleep. The old double up your sleeping bag. Is that an effective method?
That absolutely works. I did it for years and years. And remember, there's a time when people didn't have sleeping bags. These sleeping bags are a modern invention, a way of having a compact, fairly lightweight sleep system. Once upon a time, people just used blankets and quilts, right? And they just made sure they kept them darn dry, and they avoided cotton, right? So wool was great for that, right? So if you have wool blankets, that's fantastic, right? But big puffy quilts and blankets. I mean, so if you don't have anything else except just your household thick blankets, and big polar fleece covers and stuff like that, you can bring those, right? They'll just take up an enormous amount of space, and it'll be a lot heavier than a sleeping bag. But a sleeping bag is just a modern innovation, a way of having a sleep system that's compact and lighter weight. Before that, people had something that was kind of like a sleeping bag. It was, it was a tick. It was, basically something that they would stuff with natural materials and natural fibers. It was basically a giant pillowcase that they would stuff with stuff, and they could crawl inside of it. And they would, wrap wool blankets around themselves. And that's all that people had. And, our ancestor had nothing but furs and hides, which are absolutely superior to anything that you can buy. So I say nothing but I mean, they were big and cumbersome and heavy. And obviously they had to obtain them by killing animals, right? So, they were very, very valuable to them, right? But I mean, that's what we used for millennia. And that's what people to this day use as animal hides. So, if you don't have anything but a big pile of blankets, and you've got a sled or a toboggan or something like that, and you can chain your sleds together. If it doesn't fit on one sled, just choo-choo train them together, one behind the other, and put your bedding on the last one, and you'll be fine. Just make sure it's in a waterproof. Put it in big, garbage bags or something like that, and you'll be fine. That will absolutely work. Just make sure you have plenty of insulation underneath you, not just on top of you and around you.
Mm-hmm. The big thing right now, or you see a lot of YouTubers out there, and it's like, oh, I'm going out in -20, -30 degrees, and I'm bringing nothing more than a wool blanket.
Yeah, that's right. A bad idea.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's a challenge for them. I would assume something that I don't think I'd want to try. But what about Grandma's old Sears blanket or wool blanket? Is that something that you might consider to bring out there to help keep warm?
If I'm worried about my sleep system being inadequate, which I used to be until I got this crazy expensive bag, I would bring a wool blanket. Yeah, absolutely. It serves two purposes. One, it can be, well, three. I mean, it can go outside my bag, and it will breathe and allow moisture to migrate, so it's not going to condense on my bag. I could line my bag with it, and I could fold it up lengthwise and add layers of insulation beneath me if I get a cold spot. So wool blankets are fantastic. They're also great for sitting around on. You just have to be careful if you're directly on snow with them, because your body heat will migrate through the material, and it will freeze to snow. It'll melt the snow just enough, and then when you move away from that and you're not warming it anymore, the snow freezes to all the little fibers in the wool, and then you're like ripping your blanket to shreds, and bringing up big hunks of snow with it when you got to pack it out. So if you're going to use a wool blanket as sort of a ground cloth or something like that, that's fine. But put down something plasticky or Typar paper or something else underneath, so that it's not in direct contact with the snow, because it has a tendency to freeze in place and be hard to lift up. But a wool blanket is fantastic. If you've got like an old horse blanket or something like that, those are great. I used to use horse blankets when I was young. Yeah, I used to get my hands on horse blankets. They were really, really thick. They're super heavy.
Isn't that like a moving blanket type of deal? One of those?
No, moving blankets tend to be quilted and kind of padded.
Yeah.
They were just super, super thick, dark brown blankets. They're called horse blankets because they used to put them on the horses. So after a horse would go on a jog on a cold day, it would be, covered in sweat and stuff like that. They want to, cool the horse down gradually. They'd throw these huge, heavy blankets over the horse. So it's big enough to drape a horse and thick enough to actually keep that animal warm. So they were great, but they're super heavy. Like it would be a bundle like this. It would just be this huge thing. But they were super warm. And that's what we had because all we had were summer sleeping bags. When I was a kid from Canadian Tire or Cardinal, if you remember that outlet. That's what we had for sleeping bags. They're terrible. And we were sleeping in snow shelters in like -20 and sometimes colder. It didn't get that cold in the snow shelter, but we didn't have a sleeping bag. We had like a, +5 sleeping bag. Terrible. Right. Absolutely terrible.
Now, this here goes back to, I remember seeing on a forum one time, I think it was a hammock forum or something, where their sleep systems are a little bit different because a lot of them use underquilts. But this one gentleman was using an old duvet, one of those old, the down-filled duvets.
Yep.
And he was turning that into an underquilt. So I guess you could do that, the same type of thing as an overquilt or another layer on top. I'm just trying to generate different ideas for people that might be on a budget, trying to get out there for a first or second time and trying to gather some extra warmth, right?
Quilts are often made with either a cottony fill or a cottony outside. And so cotton's not great because once it gets wet, it's very hard to dry. So if you're in a snow shelter or a cold tent, it's going to be hard to dry it out. If you're in a hot tent, it's not a big deal. You can hang it up in there and get that stove going really hot, and you can dry things out. But so quilts would be fine depending on what they're made of. I would just be worried about moisture, from your body getting into them, or moisture from damp air. Like a snow shelter, very often in mild temperatures, a snow shelter is very damp. Right? In deep cold, it's kind of a dry environment. But if you're in a snow shelter, like a Quincy or an igloo in moderate, like very mild temperatures, like close to -5 and warmer, it's very, very humid, clammy, damp in there, and I wouldn't want anything cottony like that kind of duvet. But yeah, downfill duvets would be great because down is wonderful and they're thick and lofty. But again, the critical thing will be what's underneath you, right? So a big wool blanket folded twice lengthwise will get you off the snow a fair way. And if you have something more than that, well, even better. So 2 of them would be even better, right?
Now, a couple of fleece blankets, you think that's going to be enough, or they're probably just a little too airy, maybe for a good installation?
Yeah, I mean, I have a thick fleece, and I don't think 2 of those would be enough to keep me warm, because it's just they're not trapping a lot of air. They're only going to trap air within the fiber itself, and then in between the 2 layers, right? So you're talking about this much air space, right? Here we go. This much airspace trapped. That's very, very little when you compare with my sleeping bag like that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to do it. Yeah.
Maybe as a liner, but not
as a liner. Yeah, I use one as a liner. I use one for years, and if I go out with a lighter bag, like if I'm igloo camping, I won't bring my big bag. I'll bring a much lighter bag, and I can bring the fleece liner, and that can serve either as protection, ground insulation, or I can throw it inside. And like I said, I really like the fleece inside my sleeping bag because it's so much warmer than that cold nylon when you first get in or get back in after you slip out. So yeah, I mean, the idea is layers, just lots of them, right? And as lofty as you can. Right. You don't have to buy a sleeping bag, right?
Yeah, cool. Just want to let everybody know I've been posting a couple times throughout the chat here. If anybody wants to come up and ask a question in person on panel, feel free to do so. I'm just going to drop that link once again. No question is a silly question because we're all here to learn today. I'm going to take, I got a couple starred questions here I just want to pop up, and these go from way back in. In the Woods of Crafting, Mike is asking, how do you control moisture?
Kevin, I've been doing a lot of talking here, so.
Oh no, it all depends. Hot tent is breathable. It's canvas. That's not usually a problem. When you're cold tenting, it's a 4-season tent's better than the 3-season because it lets the moisture be released from the tent. So you're breathing out, and more ventilation that tent has, the better. And then if it's not, it's going to crystallize on the tent and then fall down on you like rain. Someone was commenting about tarps being better than 4-season or 3-season. I agree. When I had a job where I had to go after wolf packs and pick up their poo, I had a job picking up their poo so they can find out if they're whatever species they are, what they're eating and stuff. But I had to make time, so I couldn't bring a hot tent. I based in a hot tent, but then when I had to go follow them, I brought a tarp, not a 4-season tent. Put the tarp up. Prevailing winds is important. Snow load is important, but basically you have more room to breathe, and then you can have a fire in front of you with a firewall. So that's a huge difference than a 4-season tent. So instead of me just crawling in the tent and hoping I didn't die by morning, and then chiseling the ice off my boots so I can just get going in the morning, I just gave up. This is stupid. So fire is your element out there, right? So I would say using a tarp, as long as you do it properly, you know how to do the sort of the lean-to, the firewall in the front, and getting up every now and then to keep the fire going if you're cold. But make sure you have a good sleep system again, because you're sleeping right on the ground, right? So, yeah.
More. Do you think it's more important to have insulation under you or on top of you?
Under.
Well, I don't know. Like I think Martin made a good point tonight with the whole flip over thing. I never thought of. I don't know. Like I always thought underneath you is more important, whether it's snow insulation, whether it's whatever you have to keep underneath you. But I wouldn't. The one thing I wouldn't ever do. I've tried twice. I wouldn't sleep in a bivvy. Like those bivvy bags.
Yeah.
And they're lightweight. It's like a coffin. You're not having fun at all. Like that, to me, the winter camping, I'm enjoying myself out there. I'm not trying to survive out there. And so I do remember Tim Foley from Canadian Outdoor Equipment. He once joined us years ago. Andy and I brought a hot tent, and he brought a bivvy. And of course, yeah, he was way ahead of us because the weight ratio, right? But the second night, it got really cold, and he's banging on the tent. Hey, can I come in, guys? And he's never used a bivvy since. So
really. Yeah, I've heard many horror stories. Unless you have a really good bivvy, one that actually breathes and stuff like that. I don't know. It's yeah. I think I'd rather have a one-man tent than a bivvy.
Well, I think the really crucial thing we should mention is that it all depends on the time of year. Like right now is my prime time to go winter camping. The cold snaps are leaving, and March is coming, and March is one of the best times to go winter camping. The days are longer. You're acclimatized to the cold environment. You're not going to get minus 40 every single night for a week. You might get one night. The only problem is that it is the snow getting all crusty and then getting all slushy. But I mean, everybody thinks we should go in December and January, and I would say right now is the prime time to start winter camping.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another question here, and this is pretty interesting because I wonder if this really works. Does anyone dig a cold well in the snow for your floorless tent?
I do. I do for two reasons. So I don't dig a cold well because it creates, a sinkhole where the cold air in my tent, the coldest air, will spill off my sleeping shelf in there. It'll puddle in the hole. That's true. It will do that. But I mean, unless it's a really big hole, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference in my hot tent. So I do create a hole, a well, just inside the door of my hot tent. So I have a snow tracker tent. So it's kind of an A-frame, right? You open the door and you walk in right under the peak of the A-frame, and you step down usually about a foot, no more than 18 inches, into a hole that I dig. Okay, and I dig it kind of square, and then the stove is right on the left, and my sleep system is all in front of me, and I got some wood stored over here and other gear stored on the right. But I walk in and I step into a hole. And the reason I do that is twofold. One, when I unzip that tent, I hate having this sort of scrunch down to crawl in. It's easier to just step in and step down. And now I'm standing at my full height in my tent, and I didn't have to duck down to get through the doorway. And it's the same thing when I'm coming out, especially when my arms are laden with gear, with firewood, right? It's easier to just step down into my tent, and I don't have to hunch over like this. And so that's easier. The other thing is that if you're in a hot tent, there's firewood, there's birch bark, there's there's all kinds of forest debris that gets littered around. You just sweep it all into the pit, and it keeps your sleeping area, sitting area, and dining area nice and clean. So it's just a debris pit. So I like it for that reason also. When I'm cold tenting, I dig a similar pit outside my tent, just outside the door, but under the vestibule. And that way, when I want to go into my tent, I don't have to crawl in on all fours. I step down into my vestibule, I turn around, I sit my butt on the tent floor. So let's say I'm crawling out of the tent. I open the door, right? I shimmy out, and I put my feet down into the cold pit. So my legs and feet are in the vestibule. I'm sitting with my bum and upper body inside my tent, upright, like I'm sitting on a chair. It's easier to put on my boots. It's easier to get dressed. I can eat a meal that way with the vestibule door closed. And it's just easier to get in and out of the tent without having to, get down on all fours. So if I'm cold tenting, there's going to be a pit under the vestibule outside the door. And if I'm hot tenting, there's no vestibule. So there's going to be a pit just inside the door of the hot tent. But it's not I don't do it for the purposes of a cold sink. I mean, that's not a bad idea, but I just don't think
you think that would actually work though? Like, would there be a noticeable difference of having?
If it was big enough, yes, it would. So what happens is in any structure, this is most noticeable in something like a quinzhee or an igloo. Okay. So if I'm making a big enough igloo, and floor space is plentiful, then what I'll do is I will trench. I'll do the same thing in a quinzhee. I will trench about this wide and about that deep all the way around the floor, right where the walls meet the floor, around the perimeter of the floor. I'll dig a tiny little trench. Inside any snow shelter, the temperature at floor level is coldest, and your body heat is warming that shelter. A snow shelter is a heat trap. It blocks all wind, so it doesn't lose much heat through conduction, radiation, or convection. Okay, but compared to like a tent, for instance. And it traps heat really, really well because the walls, being of snow, are fantastic insulators. But there's going to be a temperature gradient, nice and warm at the top compared to the bottom. All right, noticeably so. Like, you put your hand down at the floor level and then just raise your hand up to and you will notice the temperature gradient. Okay. Now, if you dig a trench that's deep enough and wide enough all the way around, the coldest air that happens to be sitting on the shelf will spill and puddle in that perimeter. Okay. So it will make a difference. Not a huge difference, but remember I said I've never had a water bottle freeze in an igloo. Well, I had one freeze in a quinzhee once. Only time it ever happened, and it's because it was lying down in that little
in that
cold well that cold trap, that pit. Yeah. And now maybe it was cold enough that it would have frozen inside if it had been just 6 inches higher on the sleeping shelf with me. But so having your sleeping shelf raised relative to a little pit around you actually makes a difference. And that cold air, by the way, it pools and it puddles and it sort of falls into the cold pit of the entrance. You want your entrance into your snow shelter to be lower than your sleeping shelf, right? You want to crawl into your igloo or your quinzhee and then up onto your sleeping shelf, right? And so cold air puddles there as well. So I have found that it makes a difference in a snow shelter. I don't know if it would make a difference in a hot tent. I mean, yes, in principle there would be, but I mean, it's warm enough in a hot tent when you've got it going that I think the effect will be negligible.
Yes and no. When I was at Mew Lake there a couple of weeks back, the temperature in our hot tent was great. It was nice and warm or hot in there, and you could feel the gradual coldness going down to the floor. Mm-hmm. The floor was still freezing cold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that case, for a sleep system, Kevin, have you ever built like a sleep shelf inside of your hot tent?
Yeah, so there's two methods. It's like, again, yin and yang, right? So you could keep the snow compact in the back of the hot tent, and that's where you sleep on top of. And then you shovel out all the snow around where your stove is, because eventually that stove is going to start sinking anyway because of the heat, right?
Yeah.
It all depends how long you're going to be in that tent. If it's doing just one night and then you're going to haul out again the next day to move your site, I don't know. That's a lot of work. But if you're going to base camp for a while, that makes a lot of sense to do that, because you're using the snow in the back to keep you up, right, and use that snow as insulation, so you're not sleeping right on the cold ground. Again, you're using snow as your insulation, right?
Yeah.
But if you're actually at the front where the stove is, there's no sense having snow there, because where you're sitting in your chair, you know those chairs, right? You're going like, whoa. Yeah. It's going to start melting, and your stove's going to melt. I mean, I put asbestos cloth on the bottom and a reflector heat on the bottom of the stove, and actually put wood on the side, so if it does start melting, at least keeps it level. But that makes sense. But for one night, I wouldn't do that if I was going to move every day. But if I was going to base camp for 2 or 3 days, then makes sense.
How high would you build a sleep platform?
Well, it depends on how much snow you have. I mean, we have lots of snow this year, so I would actually just compact the snow that's back there, and then dig down on the front. So we're talking at least that much, or at least. So you're basically crawling up into bed. It's almost like a bunk bed, right? But again, it's not a bunk bed because you have insulation below you. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Mind you, if you're in a hot tent and you're doing that, if you get it too high, then it's just going to start melting anyways, right?
It all depends how big your hot tent is and how much wood you're putting in, and if you're cold sleeping or hot sleeping, because that's a big thing too. Like if you're going to keep the stove going all night, then that makes a difference. But like I like cold sleeping. My buddy Andy wants a hot sleep. He'll get up every 2 hours to keep the fire going. I got nothing against that, but once I'm in my bag, I'm not going to get out to get the fire going. Like I'm good. I got a -35 bag.
Yeah.
So it all depends on your character.
Cool. Very cool.
I have a thought on the feeding the stove all night long. So you need 4 things to stay warm, since we're talking about how to stay warm at night, stuff like that. You also want to stay warm during the day. And to thermoregulate properly, you need a few things. You need to be hydrated. You can't be dehydrated. You have to be fed. You need to be properly clothed, that is insulated against the winter cold. And lastly, you need to be well rested. You need to sleep. Nobody can stay warm or regulate their temperature properly if they don't get enough sleep. It's really, really hard. If you deprive people of sleep and you put them in cold temperatures for an extended period, they just lose the ability to stay warm. And that will include at night. So one of the reasons I like to sleep cold and rely on my sleep system is not just safety concerns, or what if there's an emergency and I don't have my tent and my stove, I need a backup sleep, that's all true. But just aside from that, I want to sleep at night. I want to be well rested. I want to be refreshed when I wake up in the morning and I fire up that stove. I don't want to be bleary-eyed, and I don't want to be having a hard time all day long regulating my body temperature because I'm poorly rested. And it's okay for a weekend. 1 or 2 nights of that is fine. When you get back to your home, you can get caught up on your sleep. But if you were out there for longer than that, it's imperative that you sleep properly. So you don't want to be up all night doing that. So for an extended trip, you definitely don't want to be up all night feeding the stove, unless there's a group of you and you can sort of distribute the load. Okay, it's your turn to be up tonight, feeding the stove. Or if you're Kevin and you have a friend, Andy, who's willing to do it, for a few nights, then that's fine. That works too.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when we were at Mule Lake a few weeks ago, a friend of mine who's never winter camped before, he come, and he was probably a little ill-equipped when it come to his sleeping system. So at nighttime, he did get cold, right? Yeah. So the next day, we actually took the stove in the tent and we turned it towards him so that he could be the guy in charge of feeding the wood, right? But the only problem was when it got warm, he'd fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then he wouldn't wake up until the fire was already out again, right? So we'd have to get back up, restart the fire and stuff. So
that wakes everybody. That wakes everybody.
Yeah. But you know what? If you have the right equipment, then the cold sleep is not really that much of a problem.
Yeah.
If I look like I'm not looking at the screen right now, I'm just trying to pull up a couple of images here. Martin, you had a couple pictures that you were talking about sharing, right?
Yeah. Well, you said that one of the things you wanted to talk about was sort of, avoiding catastrophe. And when winter camping, there's some certain things that I like to do. So there's a couple of practices sort of that I think everybody should bear in mind. Do you want to bring up the bottom picture that I sent you? I sent you 2 pictures. Are you able to do that?
Yeah. Let me just.
Yeah, I sent them to your Dennis Facebook.
Here.
Yeah.
Is that the one with the tent?
No, the other one.
Oh, okay. There we go. It's and add to the stream. There you go.
Okay, so that's just a picture of me on a hot tenting camping trip years ago, and that's just what I'm wearing. I'm sled hauling, so I'm stripped down to practically nothing. All my extra layers are on in a bag on the pulp behind me. But if you look at what I'm wearing around my waist, I have a fanny pack, and that's my ditch kit. Now I have a ditch kit for tripping by canoe and hiking and backpacking in the summer, but in the winter I have a bigger version of that, and it's this right here. If you can sort of switch back to me here, get rid of that image. This is my ditch kit. It's just a great big fanny pack, and what's in it? Well, I spare waterproof socks in case I get a soaker or something like that. So they're waterproof and Gore-Tex and merino wool lined and all that. They're expensive socks, but you could just have a big thick pair of wool socks in some plastic bags to keep your feet warm, so that you would have something to change into that was warm and dry. The plastic bags you could use over the socks to create a vapor barrier. If your boot was soaking wet, you could put your dry foot and your dry sock in a plastic bag back into the soaking wet boot, and you'd still have warm feet. I have a bivy bag in here. I have a miniature tarp in here, an absolutely foolproof, fail-proof, must get a fire going easily kit in here. So this is my ditch kit. I carry this with me all the time. It's got a whistle, a multi-tool, all that stuff. So I always have that with me. And if you can go to the second picture, Dennis.
Yep. Let's do another screen share.
So the point is, I have an emergency shelter in that bag, and I have an emergency sleep system in that bag. Now in the second photo, if you'll look in front of the tent there, I have my shovel stuck in the snow. That's about 5 feet in front of so I have a shovel planted upright in the snow about 5 feet in front of my hot tent there, and my ditch kit is hanging outside there, and it's outside in case something happens, if something catastrophically goes wrong, if there's a fire in the tent, if my whole sleep system gets badly burned or damaged or smoked out, or something happens and I can't stay in that tent, I have a sleep system. And it's not in my tent. So that's
a great idea.
So it is outside. So I have an entire shelter, emergency shelter. It's not going to be comfortable, but I will survive. I have an emergency sleep system, fire starter, shelter, everything there outside my tent. And over on my toboggan, this is a photo that I took on a course that I taught a few weekends ago. On my toboggan, there is a duffel bag, again, outside my tent with an entire sleep system and sheltering system for the people that I was guiding as well. So it's not just me who's going to survive. They're going to make it through the night too. But again, they are outside the tent. They don't come in with me, because part of the idea here is if something goes disastrously wrong, I want these things available, even if the tent is completely gone, blew away in the wind or something like that. I have sort of an auxiliary or backup system to get me out of the woods, to get me through one bad night and get me out of the woods the next day.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. There you go. See, we all learned something. We do have somebody in the basement that I'd like to bring on up here. I'm just going to drop that, and welcome to the live stream. We got Nate Muskoka. How you doing, Nate?
Wow, look where Nate is. Look where Nate is.
You're in the woods, man.
I am.
Are you dying? Are you cold?
No, not yet. Anyways, but we'll see. I've been listening intently. Not that there's much I can do about it now.
You've been listening intently.
Oh.
Wah, wah, wah.
Sorry.
You know, Martin, on that last photo when you said you had taken a pic of the group of tents on a guided on your guided excursion, and you had the ditch kit on the shovel. I was just envisioning something catastrophic happening, and you coming out of the burned down tent and grabbing your ditch kit and saying, "Well, nice to meet you, everybody." Bye.
So Nate, you're obviously out winter camping tonight yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what have you got for a sleep system?
On some crown land northeast of Huntsville. Close enough for Martin to come and tuck me in.
Was that an invitation?
No.
Oh.
But, just giving the relative distance.
Yeah.
I did have a question. We were just talking about, going from like your day clothes into your night sleep clothes, and warming up your sleeping bag. But I was just wondering, like, would there not be an advantage to sort of having your sleeping bag zipped open to allow the wood heat from the stove to sort of be absorbed into the sleeping bag, and then go that route, and maybe even hanging your night clothes above the tent to warm up? Or
yeah, absolutely. So if I'm hot tenting, I will sometimes hang my sleeping bag. I have a cord hanging under the ridge line. So I have an A-frame, so there's a ridge line, a ridge pole, and I have a cord underneath, and I'll put my sleeping bag up there because hot tent, the hot air rises, right? So the hottest part of the tent is up there. So I will pre-warm my bag up there, and then I'll take it down. But if I'm not hot tenting, if I'm cold tenting, which I never do, but if I'm in a igloo or a quinzhee or something like that, then the hot water bottle with my clothes wrapped up in it is the way to go. But no, otherwise my night clothes are hanging up along with my sleeping bag, and it's all pre-warmed up there. And it's really funny. It took me years to realize, it's awfully warm up there. I could just warm up my bag up there instead of doing this pee bottle thing. And the pee bottle thing in the hot tent was something that I was doing because it was a holdover of how I used to camp when I was in snow shelters. And it took me years to realize I can just exploit the advantage of all this hot air up there. And I always blast the stove really hot shortly before bed, in part for that reason, and in part because I want to consume the wood that's in the stove as much as possible, because I don't want a lot of wood smoldering in there. I don't want a lot of incomplete combustion as I'm letting the stove go out. So I try to just get it going really hot, and I'll open the door and I'll make sure it gets lots of air and lots of draw, and burn up the wood that's in there. And it makes the tent really, really hot. And so my sleeping bag is really always toasty warm now that I clued into that. And I can't believe how long it took me to figure that out. Like, I think I only started doing that 2 years ago. And before that, I was just doing the pee bottle thing, which is sort of what you do if you don't have a stove.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
One other question. You were talking about cold spots and, cold spots in your sleep system and certain areas that might get colder than others. Is there any value to the hot packs, hot pockets, whatever you want to call them, the disposable, charcoal, oxygen activated
hand warmers
that you can get for like $1 or $2 in places?
Yeah, I don't know about them warming up your sleeping bag. My wife, I mentioned earlier, she has a kind of better quality 3-season bag called a Never Summer sleeping bag, and it has a pouch that's in the foot box that's for one of those things, so you can put heating pads in there. She's never used it. I've never used it. I don't know how well it would work. I do know that if you're wearing 2 pairs of socks, you can get those toe warmer things, and you can stick them in between 2 layers of socks at night, and that will keep you warm. But I don't actually know how well that would work, having those little chemical packets activated inside your sleeping system. I don't know. I know that they don't work very well when people want to warm up their phones and batteries and stuff like that. They'll make a little pouch. They'll put all their rechargeable devices, their phones and their power banks and their spare batteries in a pouch, and they'll put those heat packs in there. And apparently they don't do a lot to keep the batteries alive. So I don't know why that wouldn't.
They're activated by air, oxygen though, are you?
Oh, is that what's happening? Then people are sort of smothering them.
Like they're smothering. It's same principle. If you put them in your pocket, there they don't seem to heat up as good as if you have them outside of your pocket.
Aha. Okay. Right. So how do those toe warmers work when they're like sandwiched between two layers of socks inside your boot?
The initial idea is that to get the chemical reaction going, you need oxygen. After it's started, it'll sustain itself.
Right. Okay.
And that's how the toe warmers function. A couple weeks ago, I was out by myself and experimenting with my sleep system, which was a very cold idea. But I ended up actually using a couple, and I was kind of sleeping sort of on my back, and I jammed a couple right by my kidneys. And this was after I'd gone pee. And I actually found, like, I was surprised at how quickly it sort of wore me up. And it definitely helped. I do use them now and then to warm up my phone, but you definitely need to add some space for oxygen, or at least I allow mine to air out for about 2 to 3 minutes before I stick them anywhere. So.
Well, I've learned a couple of things right there about how to use those, because I mean, I always carry them like they're literally in my ditch kit, but I have never used one. Like I think the last time I used one was like a decade ago. Someone, I had cold hands and someone gave me one, and I always carry them, but I never use them, and so I don't have any experience. So this has been an education, and I'm glad to know that you found that putting them sort of in the small of your back around your kidneys made a difference. I've heard someone else say the same thing, but I've never tried it. So that's good to know.
If I may, also those things do have an expiry date on them too. Eh? Yeah. They have a best before date on them, so keep that in mind too. That if keep the expired ones for around the house use, and if you are going to use something like that, make sure you pick up some that have a valid expiration date on them.
You can usually tell if they're expired because they get sort of hard and crunchy. You can tell they're already sort of pooched.
Right.
Before you even open them up. Yeah, I mean, I think for the cost, it's nice to have as like it's a very, very sort of cheap fix, not a solution, but can be a fix or a crutch in certain areas. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, if you have a cold spot and you don't have enough insulating layers, you don't have any spare garments around to, tuck underneath you to get you up off that, that would negate the effect of a cold spot, presumably. I mean, so that would be great. I mean, when you're trying to sleep, whatever works. So I wouldn't be averse to it at all. I have not used them. I have not needed them. But I'm happy to know that it works when you're trying to sleep too. And that putting them on your kidneys makes a significant difference, as opposed to, I usually get cold feet is what happens with me. And so I have thought about putting them down there, but I always manage to get through it. I put on down booties, or I'll put my felt boot liners on my feet. I always have a wet pair and a dry pair. I'll put the dry pair on in the night, and that usually gets me around the cold foot problem if it's really cold. But yeah, I mean, those chemical handlers. This trip that I went on with people, they were having some problems with cold feet when we first started out because it was really, really cold. It was minus 34. And they put in those toe warmers, and they were fine after that. They were great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was listening intently to your layering of the airfill sleeping pad underneath the foam pad, and looking over at my sleep system to realize my closed cell foam pad was already nicely integrated down into the snow. And no, I would not be trying the Pine Martin method tonight.
Right.
So can you tell us what your sleep system is?
Yeah, tonight it is, and I've experimented with a few, and Martin knows this because I've tried all manner of warmer temperature sleeping bags with a variation of a fleece liner and wool blankets, etc., etc. But I actually just bought secondhand a Big Agnes minus 30 bag that's synthetic, and I bought it from a fellow Huntsvillian by the name of Chris Adamiak, who Kevin Callan knows and is a friend of Tim Foley at Canadian Outdoor Equipment. So. Goes around, comes around, and he was happy to see it put to good use. And tonight will be my first night in it. It is synthetic, so it's rather bulky. Importantly for me, it is very much a big and tall. gentleman's bag. I cannot abide a mummy bag. It's part of the reason that I haven't bought a colder rated sleeping bag to date, because I have not found one that I can fit inside of and not feel claustrophobic. So this is very roomy and generous, and we'll see whether that actually means that it's going to stay warm with a good amount of air floating around in there. But I don't know. Probably fairly difficult to see, but given that it's maroon in color. But yeah, so tonight I'll be trying that. It's supposed to get down to about minus 19 or 20 tonight, so I'll be trying that with a polar fleece liner on the inside, and then a closed cell foam pad on the snow, and then an insulated air pad on top of that. We'll see how it goes.
Good luck. Yeah.
So being in the retail business for outdoor equipment like this, Nate, what is a safe budget that somebody could set out to get themselves fairly well equipped for a good sleep system? Ballpark.
Sleep system?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's tricky. I mean, so the general rule of thumb still applies between the difference between down and synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
Down is more expensive to source and manufacture than synthetic, synthetic is usually made up of recycled polyester of some sort. And down obviously comes from either goose or duck. And the responsibly sourced stuff comes as a byproduct of the food industry. A synthetic bag is generally speaking going to be much bulkier, but it will save you some money. And of course, you can probably get away with a sleeping pad, a blue foam sleeping pad to sleep on top of, to put on the snow, or pine marten. If you're doing the pine marten method, I mean that still costs you $20, right? And then a decent air-filled pad with insulation to go on top of that or underneath it will run you somewhere between 110 to the sky's the limit. Like you see Kevin there has a down-filled one, and that'll be a couple $100. But you can get a synthetic filled insulative air-filled pad for about $100 to $140. A polar fleece liner, like a zipped up polar fleece liner, I mean, you can get one by North 49 for $25, $30 easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sleeping bag is the kicker there. So even a synthetic bag to get down to, as long as you don't mind it being bulky, there's companies like World Famous and North 49 that still make price point bags. You are going to get what you pay for with that. But you can get a minus 30 bag from those guys for a couple $100, $250-ish. And then of course, if you want to get something that's not quite as bulky but is still synthetic filled, you're probably up around $400 or $500, and then down just goes up from there to around the price of Martens, which is usually around $1,000. And if you really start poking around online in those higher tier companies that are making minus 40 down bags like Big Agnes, Nemo, Marmot, the North Face, you can pay far north of $1,000 if you want to.
Yeah. It's not a cheap hobby for sure. But you know what? If you could find the deals, keep watching those Kijiji ads or those those marketplace ads.
The other week I was just experimenting, and I was using a 0 degree sail sleeping bag synthetic. I think retail on that thing's $80, and then I was using my blue foam pad, which is $20, and then my air filled pad, right, which was just over $100. And then I used my polar fleece liner, so there's $35, and then I had a wool blanket, and it was about minus 12 that night. And I did have to use those hot hands just for a couple, spots, but I was fine. So that's pretty value priced at that point. But you got to watch your temperature. Would I be out here tonight when it's going down to minus 20 with that 0 degree bag, with a wool blanket wrapped around me? Probably not.
Yeah. So it's all about insulation to keep yourself warm, right? We do have another person in the basement that I'd like to bring up here. You going to stick around for a bit, Nate?
Sure. Yeah, as long as my battery and data doesn't.
All righty. We have Karina. How you doing, Karina?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Got a question for the boys?
Yeah, so I wondered, what do you guys prefer? Camping in like kind of milder winter weather where the snow is a little bit damper and your equipment gets a little bit wet, but it's more manageable temperatures and stuff like that, or like minus 15 and below where the snow is dry and everything kind of stays dry, but you've got colder fingers and more risk of frostbite, stuff like that.
Well, for me, it's definitely, I prefer the colder, drier temperatures. For me, the sweet spot is around minus 15. So minus 10 to minus 20 is great. When it gets colder than that, you know, every slight breeze, the wind chill becomes a real factor to consider. It can be unpleasant if it's very windy. But I find that the temperatures warmer than minus 10, especially around minus 5, the snow starts to get soft. Once it gets sunny out, you just get wet. You sweat more, but also you get wet from contact with the snow. It's one of the reasons why when I used to do a lot more igloo camping and Quincy camping, I didn't make a fire, because you'd make a fire and then, so you were fine, you were nice and warm and stuff like that, but your clothes would get hot. It would literally get warmed by the fire, and then you'd walk to go get wood or something like that, and you'd get soaked because the snow would brush up against your warm clothes and it would immediately liquefy, and you were constantly going back and drying yourself. And I learned from an old guy from Colorado, the guy who invented the icebox igloo tool, Igloo Ed, taught me, don't do that. Stop making the fire to warm yourself. Unless you absolutely need to dry out some gear, don't make a fire. Just camp cold. Just learn how to dress and learn how to eat and learn how to be active when you need to, and you'll be fine. And so I actually learned to prefer the really colder days between, minus 15 and minus 20. That for me is optimal. It's a nice, dry, cold, especially in a snow shelter. Snow shelters tend to be damp. So especially in a snow shelter or a cold tent, like a 4-season cold tent, minus 5 is brutal. Everything is so damp and clammy. I find I never quite get warmed up. And that's because the dampness is causing more heat loss through evaporation. Well, not evaporation, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Condensation. No.
Yeah, no, I can't think of the word right now. But anyway, you know what I mean. It's just like having wet socks. When your clothes are wet, you get colder faster. So that's the problem I have with those temperatures. So for me, I like it colder. I'm curious what the others though think about this.
Yeah, the word you're looking for is the humidity levels.
Yeah, just dampness. But there's a specific term I can't think of right now. It'll come to me as soon as we're off air.
How about you, Kevin? What do you prefer?
Well, I prefer to go further north because the more you're close to like Lake Ontario, it's a damp cold. And if you're downtown Toronto and it's minus 12 or minus 6, whatever, it's a damp cold and you're really cold. But if you're up in Timmins and it's a minus 25, it's a dry cold and you can deal with that, right? But with global warming, I got to say, I can't answer that question because we're all messed up. Like, I don't know what the vendors is going to be like on trip anymore. So I got to have to deal with, like, I bring a rain suit, I bring a parka, I bring extra woolies, I bring booties. I deal with every single day is going to be a change of environment. And I think that's the problem. But I'd rather have it a dry cold. So if I had to answer that question, I'd rather have a dry cold than a wet cold that gets to your bones.
Yeah, I'm in there too. I like the dry cold, but not so extreme that it's minus into minus 30s, minus 40s.
Though, it terrifies you. But I had a workshop last weekend in Haliburton, and a lot of them were coming from cities, right? And it was minus 27, and it didn't get warmer. Like it was minus 27 in the morning, and it stayed that cold. And we all thought nobody's going to show up, and they did. It was great. And I got to say, not one person was cold until at 3:30. Or maybe no, it was 2:30. It was getting the end of the day. The sun was setting, and then they felt damp. And you could tell, and the one woman's lips were blue. You can see that she was getting cold, not terribly cold. But we, you know, so I said, okay, well, here's the difference. Like during the day right now, in February, like today, or even yesterday, especially, I had my students out yesterday, and it was minus 27, and they had running shoes on, no gloves, because they're my students, whatever. But as long as we're in the sun, so when I went into the bush with them, there was no sunlight. You can see them getting cold. Yeah. It's just and acclimatization too. Like we're now getting used to the cold, whereas in December we're like, oh, I hate winter. But now we're getting acclimatized. So I don't know. But sorry, I'm blabbing on. Dry cold instead of a damp cold. Dampness is bad. Wet is bad. Yeah, I'm okay with minus 25 as long as I can have the skill set to deal with it and be logical about it and not be in a hurry. Right? When you're winter camping, do not be in a hurry. Be very logical about it and be very skillful about it. Don't make your first camping trip a winter trip. That's a mistake.
Yeah. That's another thing. What about testing your systems at home? You know, if you're working or trying to work with a new sleep system, good place to try it out is at home, right?
Well, the backyard is the best, especially when you have kids. If you want to take kids or a new partner or whatever out for the first time, don't take them on minus 25 and up in Timmins. Like, what the friggin', you're not going to have a... So just take them in the backyard because they're an escape route, or take them friend camping to Silent Lake or Killarney or Mew Lake for the first time, not the second time or third time, the first time, because they have an escape route. And then they realize they don't need that escape route, and they're like, this is cool. Like, you have either that choice or cursing about winter all winter long. That's the two choices you have. Either you're watching Netflix beyond belief, or you go outside and enjoy it.
Yeah.
I have a thought about the backyard thing. So the backyard winter camping is a fantastic idea. You will find out whether you're clothed appropriately, whether your sleep system is up to scratch, whether your cooking system is complete and adequate for the cold. People make all kinds of discoveries. Oh, my stove doesn't get very warm in really cold weather. I have the wrong kind of stove for cold weather and stuff like that, right? Or I got soaked. My boots got soaked and I need spare liners or something like that, right? So you'll make discoveries from backyard camping. But if you just pitch a tent during the day and then you go inside the house and you do your thing and you have supper and you say, okay, well, it's dark out, let's go sleep outside, you're gonna freeze. You're gonna go from a warmed environment where your body is habituated to that warm temperature and is regulating your body temperature for the temperature that you're in. And you're going to go out into the cold and get into that sleeping bag, you're going to freeze. So if you're going to do the backyard thing for a few hours before you go to bed, be outside. It doesn't matter if you're walking around the block and going shopping or, whatever, just be outside, right? Shovel your driveway, whatever it is you want to do, just be outside for a couple of hours. Let your body become acclimated to that temperature. Let your metabolic furnace kick in for that temperature so that when you get into the tent, it's not that huge shock. Because I guarantee you, it doesn't matter how good your sleep system is. If you go from your heated house into that cold tent, you're going to find that your sleep system is inadequate. And because it's so easy to bail, you will bail.
Yeah.
And so that is absolutely the best way to do it is your backyard. And then once you go, hey, you know what? I learned some things and I think my sleep system's okay. Then go to Silent Lake, go to Mew Lake, go to a serviced site in a park where, if you run into problems, you can just get into the car and you can go home, or there's a warming shelter, or there's a heated bathroom and you're not going to get frostbite and stuff like that, right? So I think that's the way to go. Start in your backyard or a friend's yard or something like that, and then go off into a park where you can't just as easily bail, but there is still some recourse if you run into problems. And once you get your system sort of dialed in, then go ahead, go into the backcountry. That's what I would tell people.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That was actually part of another question I had, because when I did that minus 20 overnighter, like, I don't know, a month or so ago, it took me a good 2 hours to not feel cold. Yeah. Like when I got out there and started hiking and stuff, I just felt cold for about 2 hours, and then my body started to warm up finally. Yeah. And it's like there was like an hour window where my toes were frozen and my fingers were frozen. And I'm like trying to film. My camera's like not working. And I was like, oh, should I just bail? I was like, I don't know. Should I bail? Like, I'm freezing. I'm supposed to spend the night out here. And I'm already frozen. And then once you kind of get past that like mental game, then you're good to go and your body.
Yeah. It's not really a mental game. It's a physical game. Like, one of the things that people do is they get out of the hot car, the heated car, and they wear every layer that they've got so that once they step out into the cold, they're as warm as they were when they were in the car, so they don't feel the cold. But I've said this elsewhere, if you are insulating yourself so thoroughly against the cold, your body won't feel the cold. And if the body doesn't feel the cold, what will happen is it will take longer for your body to adapt to the cold. And you can go hours of being cold, but your body not really engaging and turning on that metabolic furnace, right? So that's why I'm an advocate of this principle of sort of walking or riding the cool edge. Underdress, wear less. You can always put on layers if you find you're wearing too little and you're not warming up. But let your body feel the shock of the cold. It sucks, it's unpleasant, but it's exactly the same thing as walking out of an air-conditioned building on a sweltering hot day. You feel that wall of heat when you walk out, but you don't sweat instantly. Your body has to suffer the heat before it says, how about we start sweating? How about some evaporative cooling? How about we pump blood out to the extremities and radiate heat that way to cool this body off? So your body needs time. It needs to experience and suffer the heat to learn to cool you down or to start to cool you down. And it's the same thing in winter. Your body needs to suffer. It actually has to be unpleasantly cold, not totally miserable in agony, but you have to be unpleasantly cold before your body says, oh, let's quick turn on the metabolic furnace. And so my suspicion, Karina, is that when you were out there, you were probably overdressed because it was bloody cold, and you inadvertently prolonged how long it took for your body to kick in this metabolic furnace and start warming you up. So in other words, how fast you start to warm up is sort of up to you, and you sort of learn how much you need to dress. Obviously, if you wear too little, you run the risk of falling into a heat deficit that you can't climb out of, or getting frostbite or something like that. So you obviously have to find that balance. But my suspicion is it took you that long because you were probably overdressed.
Yeah. I try to like not put the heat on in the truck too while I'm driving out to where I'm gonna start like the trailhead or whatever.
Smart.
And yeah, it definitely helps. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I was like super dressed because I'm like, it's freaking cold out. I can put everything I own on.
I agree with what Martin's saying 100% too.
It makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Last weekend I went out to my day camp. It was quite cold. There was me and a couple of buddies. And the whole time out there, them guys kept their big winter coats on and stuff like that. First thing I did after pulling my sled into the thing was take off my coat. I was down to a fleece sweater and my merino wool, and I was comfortable all day. If I started to feel a bit of a chill, I started moving around a bit, right? And right away, warm right back up, and it wasn't a problem. Even so much so, I wasn't even wearing gloves out there. So, it's riding, you call it riding that cool edge.
Yeah, riding or walking the cool edge. You want to be cool, not cold. But if you start to feel totally comfortable, you're overdressed and you're sweating. And then your body says, oh, well, it's fine. We don't need to keep trying to keep you warm. And then the opposite happens. It just shuts off the warming machinery. And then you get really cold all of a sudden, right? And it's really unpleasant. I was out teaching a course with people, and they were marveling that I was barehanding everything. I was grabbing tools, axes, knives, I was batoning wood with them. And they were like, how come your hands aren't cold? And I said, well, my hands are cold, but they're not painfully cold. They're just cold, right? I am, in fact, a little cold, but I'm not chilled, right? They were chilled, but they were wearing all these layers. I said, just take off some of these layers, let your body feel the cold. And when you start to feel cold, then move, because nothing helps warm you up faster than blood circulation, right? If you can do something energetic, like snowshoeing in deep snow or something like that, that's fantastic. Swinging an axe, working a saw, bucking up wood, that's really, really good, because it usually your whole body starts to to get into it. So those things are good. Usually your feet will get cold if you do it for too long, though, because your feet aren't moving. But if you're swinging an axe, you're usually changing position a lot and moving and stuff like that. But snowshoeing is the best because you're moving the largest muscles in your body, and your heart usually starts to beat. And I remember once telling somebody who was cold and had been complaining about it. This is a friend of mine years ago, and I was a little impatient with him. And I remember just saying, "See that hill? Put your snowshoes on and run up that hill a couple of times." And we did it together, and sure enough, by the second go up the hill, he was like, "Okay, I'm warm. Okay, well, great. Take off all that damn clothes now, and keep them off." Right? It made a huge difference. But it's amazing. People will look around and they'll go, "How come some people are not wearing hats and gloves and scarves, and other people are all bundled up?" And it's because somebody's metabolic furnace is engaged and somebody's not. And you can make sure your metabolic furnace doesn't engage by simply dressing too warmly.
Yep. Well, you know what, guys and gals, we're about 15 minutes overtime here. Just want to go around the table here once, and if you could all share one really good tip of something to do before, during, or after your sleep that'll keep you warm. Let's start at the bottom. We'll work up to our panel. Karina, you got any great ideas?
Oh, you had to start with me.
Yeah.
A really big one is go pee before you sleep. Oh my gosh. First of all, having to get out is gonna cool you down, and second of all, just having a bladder full is gonna make you feel really, really cold and extremely uncomfortable. So yeah. And and just as a little tidbit, I always bring like a little block of cheese and I eat that before bed. The like, I don't know, all the fat in it just keeps you kind of warm throughout the night.
Yeah, they say cheese,
those are good ones.
Meats, like fatty meats like a salami or pepperettes or something like that. Nuts and chocolate are really
Makes
good.
Makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've noticed that. I'm a really cold sleeper, and when I started bringing a block of cheese, plus like an Nalgene full of hot water, like those little things, they all kind of help me to stay warm and comfortable.
Good. Awesome. Nate, you got any last tips?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of stoking the stove up before I tuck in. But also I find if I keep myself busy, if I read, then I'm not thinking about cooling down. I'm not thinking about being cold. I'm not thinking about when's the stove gonna die off, and eventually, just like reading anywhere else before bed, you're nodding off. So that's one of my little things that I've been doing this year.
Cool.
Great idea.
Martin, whatever you got.
This is advice I need to follow myself. Don't drink so much damn coffee after supper. I'm a machine that functions on coffee, and of course it makes me pee, and so I end up peeing 3 times a night. And of course you lose plenty of heat out of your sleeping bag every time you get up to do that, even if you use a pee bottle, even if you're not going outside the tent. And the same goes for alcohol. So when I go out by myself, I don't drink. I mean, I might have a glass of wine or one shot of whiskey or something, that we dram. But if I'm with friends, then of course I will imbibe a little more, and then I'm done. I'm up 3 times. I have to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Kevin, what have you got for a handy tip?
2 things: mindset and bush time. When I went out with the First Nations people, Charlie, his wife, he was the elder, and his wife, she taught me so much, right? And she didn't speak English, just the things that she motioned to me. So I was really young. I was in my 20s, and we were out for a month up in Northern Ontario in -40 temperature. And I thought it'd be cool to go travel with them. I knew their son, and we're traveling, and she did 2 motions, and she watched me because they're like kind of worried that this guy from the south is going on the trip with them, and why. And she nodded to the husband and said, "Yep, he's good. Yep." And I was like, "Whoa, like why?" 2 things. One is when I knelt on the snow, I always put something on my knees. Every time I knelt down. So, because I did not want to get wet. I always want to keep dry. And the other is when I set camp up, I always kept my snowshoes on. Never took them off until the last moment. And she said those 2 things were the reasons why they let me go out with them for a month. And I go, what does that got to do with anything? And they're like, if you can figure that out, then you can figure everything else out. So yeah, it was kind of cool.
Cool. I've got a couple. First one, if it says cotton, leave it at home. do not even consider bringing it. Doesn't matter what it is. If you're relying on it for heat, leave it at home. The other thing is, I like to chow down before I go to sleep. I like to get that furnace just rocking. It'll be granola bars. It'll be pepperettes. I got to try the cheese thing, but I hate frozen cheese. Yeah, you gotta chow down. And my biggest thing, and I think one of the things that helps keep me warmest, is we talk about underlayers and sleeping with underlayers, but you have to wear underlayers that are not tight fitting. Do not wear tight socks. Do not wear, maybe in a lady's case, the tight leggings. The tight fitting. We'll call them, what do they call them? Long johns. Try to keep the looser clothing, because it allows your blood flow to circulate a lot better. And when you got good blood flow, you're going to have warmer toes and you have warmer fingers. So that's what I've got.
Yep.
Does anybody wear tight socks and stuff like that to bed? Or what about booties? Those.
I just had this image of you wearing women's long socks on, and I'm very aroused right now.
You know what? When you got a tight ass like mine, Kevin, what the hell? No,
I wear the down booties. I sometimes sleep in them. So if it's particularly cold and I don't have the big sleeping bag, I'll put down booties on in them. That they work wonders. I love those. So those are just the down filled or synthetic filled little slippers that cinch up at the top, and they're great for running around camp to go rush out and get firewood, or rush out to pee or something like that, and then rush back in without having to put your boots on and off every time. And they're great. I sleep in them all the time. I recommend those. Those are game changers if you have cold feet at night. Because they're loose fitting and they're all puffy, right? If they cinched, just to reiterate your point, if they were too tight, if they cinched around your foot like a tight sock, it would inhibit blood circulation. But they don't. They're wonderful for that. That and your wool felt liners. Yeah, those are the ones. Your wool felt liners that go inside your pack boots. Those are another great slipper to put inside your sleeping bag and wear them on your feet if they're dry. If they're wet, don't, because that's not going to work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you know what? I think we shared a lot of great tips and ideas tonight. You know what? YouTube, there's a whole wealth of information on there. You can find various outdoor campers that have, like, they do a lot of really deep expedition type of camping, and a lot of their videos explain their sleep systems. There's no reason to sleep cold when you're out there. You just need to fine tune your system with your proper insulation, your proper layering, and good gear helps. But work with what you have and test it out at home. That's what I like to say. Anything in closing, fellas? No?
I've had plenty to say. Thank you.
Yeah. You know what? Here's a great resource right here, written by this gentleman over here. You have twins, right? But pick up a copy of this. If anybody needs a link to that, it's in the description below. I also have a bunch of links down below to various pieces of gear that you might be interested in, some of which was actually shown on screen tonight. So by all means, feel free to check it out. And what have you got there? Paradise Below Zero. Is that a good book? There you go. So, as referred by Mr. Kevin Callan. Anyways, I'm just going to drop you all into the basement, so stick around for a few minutes. Thanks very much for joining, guys and gals. You know what? All your input's been great. I've been seeing a lot of great comments from everybody, having enjoyed the show. So, hopefully we did something good tonight. Talk to you in a bit. See you in a minute there, fellas. All righty. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the show tonight. Once again, sorry for missing last week. Just had to take care of a few things and re-energize the system. You know how it gets. Sometimes routine gets to be routine, right? Sometimes you got to break the routine. But you know what? We will be back next week. So by all means, keep your eyes on our Facebook page at Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show. And we'll keep you posted on there as to what's coming up with the show. We are 4 episodes away from hitting our 100th episode on Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show. So I'm trying to work on a few things there to have a real special evening. So that'll be happening sometime in March. Make sure you, once again, follow us on Facebook so that you know what's going on. If you haven't already done so, please smash that thumbs up button down there. See, we got about 85 thumbs up. That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button, feel free to do that so that you can join us again on a Tuesday evening. Anyways, everybody, have yourselves a great week. Stay safe. Get out there and enjoy the winter weather. Stay warm, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in another week. Keep the adventures alive.